A woman's ethereal silhouette glows against a snowy, starry night. The scene shifts as she reflects on her cold return.
Arkan, a small western country, is introduced amidst the snow.
A massive castle looms over a quiet village beneath the moon.
Agony erupts as a wet, sickening squelch sounds during a brutal assault.
A masked torturer asks his prisoner if she remembers, ignoring her costs.
He continues the torment while she lets out a pained groan. In a dark dungeon, terrified girls huddle near a mangled body. A young girl stares in absolute horror at the surrounding violence. Tears stream down her face as she witnesses the prisoner's suffering.
Strung up and bloody, the victim is mocked by the torturer.
The masked man demands the lyrics to her clan's ancient song. The brown-haired girl huddles with her friends, frozen in utter fear. She tearfully realizes the song they seek has no further lyrics. The prisoner's bloody feet dangle as the narrative hope fades away. The masked man notices his victim has finally gone silent. He coldly asks if another one died while the girl's weak. He casually adjusts his grip on the whip, showing no remorse. He mockingly laughs while dragging the lifeless girl across the floor. A soft rustle sounds as he discards the broken, bloody prisoner. He glances back, noting there are plenty more playmates to torment. The remaining girls are trembling together in the flickering candlelit. A single tear falls as she mourns her fallen friend's fate. 2 months earlier, peace reigned in the autumn village of Ivergina. Her life changed forever upon reaching her 18th year. Villagers gather around a well on a bright, sunny afternoon. The brown-haired girl looks up, noticing a change in the air. A striking, red-haired stranger arrives, capturing the entire village's attention. Curious villagers crowd the beautiful outsider, questioning her sudden arrival. The red-haired woman smiles, noting they rarely see any outsiders there. She asks if this is the village serving the winter camp. An elder confirms they once worshipped him as a living god.
The brown-haired girl stands proudly before a multi-armed ice statue.
The red-haired woman reacts with a look of intrigued surprise.
The girl explains that their spirits and gods have long vanished. Above them, the ethereal image of the Winter King remains silent. The villagers realize she is speaking of their sacred, ancient song. A cryptic, knowing smile plays on the red-haired woman's lips. She mentions the lost god as the girls excitedly confirm their son. The girl smiles brightly while comforting a younger child in town.
She shares a joyful moment with her friend, nodding in agreement.
The village girls hold hands and dance in a merry circle. Light sparkles around her as she sings with pure, innocent joy. The red-haired woman watches the dancing girls with a cold gaze. The protagonist laughs, her voice echoing the song's final, cryptic verses. The stranger closes her eyes, relishing the village's revealed secret lore. She concludes they know everything, her expression shifting to something predatory. Peace is shattered as armored knights suddenly loom over the children.
Blood sprays as a knight brutally strikes down one of the girls.
The villagers fall in terror as their peaceful lives are destroyed. Blood sprays against armored boots as the massacre begins in earnest. The red-haired woman demands the rest of the song, issuing a threat. Villagers weep as she threats death. The brown-haired girl watches helplessly. The woman speaks of a clan girl who communicates with spirits. A predator's smile mirrors the despair in the girl's eyes. The girl dismisses legends. A hand slams down with a fet. The red-haired woman dismissively resolves to find the truth very soon. She orders the knights to take the villagers away for torture. A narration box laments the foolishness of welcoming such a devil. The girl's village family is led away in heavy iron chains. She remembers the joy of the family she found after Orphanheart. A grim narration confirms that every single villager had been killed. Alone and bound, the survivor stands within a haunting white void. Her childhood village was erased from existence by a merciless fire. A heavy dungeon door opens with a sudden, sharp creak. Bandaged and broken, the brown-haired girl huddles in her dark cell.
The red-haired woman enters the dungeon, flanked by a masked man.
The prisoner's weak voice labels the woman a devil from her corner. The masked man identifies her as the sole, resilient survivor of torture.
She curses the man as a madman who tortures for amusement.
Narration reflects on the irony of a torturer suddenly becoming merciful. Strung up, she is surrounded by the ghosts of her friends.
A bowl is slammed down with a bang as he orders her to drink.
A single eye reflects her inner trembling within the dark liquid. Battered and bruised, her face is a mask of pure exhaustion. She trembles in the corner, hiding from the woman's piercing gaze. The red-haired woman watches her prisoner with a cold, haughty stare. She dismissively asks for the child's identity, having forgotten her completely. The woman questions how long the girl has remained in the cell. She demands to know what was said as the prisoner watches. She mockingly recalls them as nothing more than simple country folk. Cruel laughter rings out as she revels in the village's destruction. A wicked, self-satisfied smile spreads across the red-haired woman's face. She claims the song was a joke and the torture unnecessary. A bloody hand grips the floor as she explains their decks. Surrounded by roses, she confidently declares that there are plenty of other ways for her to become the Empress. Visions of the massacre haunt the survivor, bringing more silent agony. A single tear falls as the mess of the past lingers. The prisoner is horrified by the woman's casual disregard for life. The red-haired woman reacts with a light, curious sound of amusement. She mockingly asks if the prisoner has forgotten her lowly position and her reason for being there. The woman offers a clean death, ending the torture at last.
She coldly tells the masked man to use the girl freely.
The masked torturer sticks out his tongue, relishing the new opportunity. The girl's eyes widen as she realizes the man's true identity. The woman whispers that the girl knows the truth best herself. Another long year passes within the silence of the dungeon walls. She lies on the floor, feeling the heavy weight of death. Above ground, a festive crowd cheers amidst a shower of confetti. Her eyes struggle to focus as the light begins to fade. A grand ceremony proclaims a new empress has finally risen. Lying broken in the dungeon, Eileen questions the woman's return. An announcement echoes through the dark cell as the emperor arrives. Crowds cheer for the emperor and his new red-haired empress. Eileen sheds a tear while remembering her past life's suffering. She huddles alone in the darkness, feeling utterly abandoned. A glowing blue ethereal boot steps into a pool of blood. The Winter King appears, his presence cooling the dungeon air. The spirit god approaches the dying girl as snowflakes fall.
He gazes down at the survivor with a calm, stoic expression.
The king laments that humans are perpetually cruel to one another. Bound and bloodied, she wonders why they chose such cruelty. The Winter King's eyes glow with an intense, otherworldly light. He declares his decision to take responsibility for her soul. A sphere of magical light begins to restore her fading life. He addresses the nameless child under the light of the moon. The divine figure watches as the cosmic energy begins to swirl. He explains their fates are joined by a mysterious providence. He offers a final prayer for her to find peace. The brown-haired girl wakes up crying in a modern bed. She remains tearful, the emotions of the dream feeling real. Confused and startled, she sits up in her contemporary room. She clutches her head, frustrated by the recurring, vivid nightmare. Sunlight fills her quiet bedroom, highlighting her computer and desk. Bright light streams in through the large balcony glass doors. She sits on the bed, staring blankly at a nearby book. She reflects on a novel that triggered these strange dreams. A sense of unease lingers after the haunting dungeon mission. She considers the book's protagonist, Elsia, a typical kind heroine. She questions why Elsia is so demonic in her dreams. Frustrated by the story, she wishes she could punch Elsia. She decides that throwing the novel away is the best solution. Feeling cursed, she tosses the book and heads for the door. While preparing for the day, she brushes her teeth tiredly. She remembers the dream version of Eileen being near death. Her memories of the dream's details begin to turn hazy. A lingering feeling persists that someone actually visited her. She tells the disturbing thoughts to get out of her head. Dressed for work, Ichikawa greets her director with a frown. The director notes her light clothing and asks if she's cold. She confidently claims to have a high tolerance for the cold. Her colleagues are surprised, noting her seemingly delicate appearance. A stern blonde woman looms silently behind the group. The blonde woman's eyes narrow with an intense, hidden resentment. The blonde woman stands alone on the building's windy roof. Ichikawa asks why she is constantly being called out there. The blonde woman grits her teeth in a moment of fury.
Ichikawa highlights the difference in their wealth and job security.
She politely asks to be left alone to do her job. Suddenly, the blonde woman violently shoves Ichikawa toward the edge. The blonde woman stands over Ichikawa, looking down with cold contempt. Ichikawa stands up and demands to know what the blonde woman is doing. The blonde woman's face is a mask of suppressed, seething fury. Ichikawa clutches her bruised cheek, her expression one of utter disbelief. The blonde woman reacts with confusion to Ichikawa's sudden, sharp defiance. Her eyes narrow as she mentions Ichikawa making a move on Executive Director Hayakawa. Enraged, the blonde woman screams as she lunges toward her colleague. Ichikawa quickly catches the woman's wrist, stopping her mid-strike with force. She holds her ground firmly, ordering the woman to stop immediately. Ichikawa warns that she is not weak and will definitely fight back. The blonde woman is visibly shaken, sweating as her aggression is neutralized. Their hands are locked in a tense struggle as the confrontation peaks. A narration box coldly declares her deep hatred for the other woman. She thinks Ichikawa is full of pride despite her good grades and achievements. The blonde woman claims that a class system truly rules the world. She declares herself the ruling class and Ichikawa the slave class. She thinks orphans should be content with giving fruits of labor to beggars. Walking away, the blonde woman asks if the world hasn't always worked this way. Ichikawa lowers her head, a dark, knowing smile creeping across her lips. She calls out to Masato, who stops and looks back with confusion. Ichikawa mentions she's the only one promoted to deputy manager this time. She laughs mockingly, asking if a slave outranking a master is a joke. Misato's eye twitches as she reaches the limit of her patience. Misato calls Mana an idiot while violently shoving her against the railing. She pokes Mana's forehead, stating she is incredibly easy to manipulate. A wicked, self-satisfied smirk stretches across Misato's face as she triumphs. Mana looks up at her with a look of genuine, confused horror. Misato gestures to the empty rooftop, questioning her choice of location. With a final shove, she tells Mana that this is why she gets targeted. Mana gasps in terror as she begins her long fall from the building. As mana falls, the spectral image of Elsia appears behind Misato.
The expressions of the modern and fantasy antagonists mirror each other's cruelty.
A single tear escapes Mana's eye as the ground rushes toward her.
Misato stands victorious, unaware of the demonic figure looming over her shoulder.
Mana's voice rings out in a final scream for Elsia as she falls. She reaches out toward the darkening sky as her life flashes before her.
Misato watches her fall, warning her never to get too carried away again. A sudden, powerful bolt of lightning strikes the very top of the building.
A pillar of celestial light erupts from the impact, reaching into the stars. A great reptilian eye snaps open, glowing with a divine green light.
Eileen wakes up gasping in her bed, drenched in sweat and trembling. She breathes heavily, struggling to recover from the vivid, terrifying nightmare.
Clutching her head, Eileen wonders what could have possibly just happened.
Tears stream down her face as the trauma of the vision lingers.
She looks around the rustic room, her mind hazy and disoriented.
The scene reveals a simple, lived-in kitchen area in an old cottage.
Eileen sits up on her wooden bed, trying to make sense of her surroundings.
Her eyes fall on a collection of birthday drawings pinned to the wall.
She reaches out to touch the paper, her hand shaking with emotion. Eileen recognizes the drawings as her 18th birthday gifts from the village children.
Eileen is visibly shaken, realizing she has reached 18 years.
Visions of torture and death cause Eileen to scream out.
She questions if mana was a dream or reality now.
Visions of a massacre and burning village ruins haunt Eileen.
She remembers her peaceful village life before the tragedy struck.
Eileen realizes she was reincarnated from the soul of Mana.
The spectral image of Mana stands behind the grieving Eileen.
Eileen finally understands that her current life is her reality. Eileen weeps while wondering about the fate of the villagers.
Terrified, she rushes toward the exit to check the village.
She reaches the doors, begging for the truth to change. Eileen opens the door and finds Rosa greeting her warmly. Horrifying visions of blood-soaked skeletons replace the living village people.
Eileen is paralyzed by sweat and tears from internal horror.
Rosa smiles at Eileen while carrying a basket of bread.
Tears fall as Eileen struggles to process her current reality.
A bloodied, chained girl's vision mockingly addresses Eileen in pain. Eileen gasps, her mind fractured by conflicting and bloody memories.
The basket of bread hits the ground with a thud.
Rosa reaches out to take Eileen's hands and comfort her.
Shocked and silent, Eileen stares at the woman's kind face.
Rosa asks if Eileen had another nightmare, showing deep concern.
The two women hold hands amidst the bright morning sunlight.
Rosa gazes at her friend with a warm, supportive smile.
Rosa explains that everyone gathered to celebrate Eileen's birthday tonight.
The vision of a blood-drenched pile of corpses returns briefly.
Eileen's face is a blur of static and silent internal screaming.
She stands alone, trembling as confetti falls around her insignificantly. Her green eyes are wide and filled with shimmering tears. Eileen breaks down, sobbing at the weight of her knowledge. Eileen hugs Rosa, who asks if she is truly alright. Crying into her shoulder, Eileen says she is okay now.
They remain embraced in the center of the peaceful village.
Eileen vows she will definitely save everyone in the village.
Eileen asks Rosa to gather everyone in the town square.
Her gaze sharpens with a sudden, new, and grim determination. Gray clouds gather over the mountains, signaling a coming change. A figure in formal, noble attire steps into the village square. The red-haired woman and her guard approach the quiet village. The noble pair stands before the confused and wary villagers.
Rosa and the others look on with visible unease and caution.
The red-haired woman walks past the villagers with cold arrogance. She pauses to observe the locals playing a simple board game.
The red-haired woman's expression is one of cold, detached judgment.
Eileen approaches, politely asking if the newcomers are just travelers.
Eileen hides her trembling hands behind her back while speaking.
The red-haired woman asks if they serve the Winter King. She smiles haughtily while adjusting her long, vibrant red hair. Eileen is confused while internally pleading to leave it alone.
The red-haired woman clarifies her search for the winter spirits.
Eileen asks Aunt Henna if she has ever heard anything about the Winter King. The purple-haired woman admits she has never heard of such a thing before. Eileen quickly tries to dismiss her own question to avoid drawing any suspicion. Princess Elsia watches the exchange from a distance with a cold, calculating gaze. Eileen considers seeking out the village chief while internally begging for silence. Silver-armored knights stand guard as a man in a cloak gathers several books. A large pile of discarded books lies scattered before the fearful village residents. Elsia recounts a legend about a vanished god and the spirits left behind. The villagers huddle together in terror as the red-haired princess looms over them. Eileen and Aunt Henna look on with expressions of deep worry and dread. Elsia leans down to ask a young boy if he knows the story. With a malicious glint in her blue eyes, Elsia offers the child a reward. Trembling with visible fear, the little boy insists he knows absolutely nothing about it. Elsia continues to smirk down at the terrified child with a menacing intensity. An older villager protects the boy, stating they found no records of the king. The gray-haired man looks on with a face full of anxiety and nervous sweat. Elsia remains unconvinced, her eyes narrowing as she scans the crowd for lies. A tense and heavy silence falls over the village under the princess's scrutiny. An internal plea from the crowd begs for the princess to just give up. A close-up of trembling, sweaty hands highlights the absolute terror of the people.
Elsia reflects on how unusually the people of Ivergina responded to her arrival.
Suspecting a hidden secret, the princess's blue eyes gleam with a dark curiosity.
A sudden, sharp thud sounding as Eileen's heart races with a fearful intensity.
Elsia openly voices her suspicion that the villagers are hiding a secret plot.
The weary group stands together, unable to mask their growing exhaustion and fear.
Backed by her knights, Elsia notes how rare it is for outsiders to visit. A memory shows the villagers appearing completely uninterested when the princess first arrived.
Elsia feels insulted that her striking appearance failed to capture anyone's attention earlier.
Eileen and another woman sweat nervously, remaining silent under the princess's intense gaze.
Eileen is visibly shaken when Elsia mentions the arrival of her rushing army.
Elsia points out the suspicious lack of resistance when her soldiers invaded the village.
The red-haired woman outright accuses the villagers of plotting something behind her back. Elsia points a finger at a gray-haired woman named Rosa in the crowd.
With a commanding gesture, the princess orders Rosa to come forward at once.
Knights roughly seize Rosa while Eileen screams out for them to stop immediately. Elsia seizes a cane and threatens to beat the truth out of them. A sharp strike draws blood as Rosa cries out in agony from the blob.
Elsia demands the woman speak up if she wishes to avoid further pain.
Rosa weeps in terror and pain, her gray hair falling over her face.
Eileen rushes forward to embrace the injured Rosa, calling her name through tears. A sudden tight hug sounding as Eileen desperately clings to the wounded woman. Looking up with intense fury, Eileen vows that she will never forgive Elsia.
Elsia watches the brown-haired woman, feeling increasingly bothered by her defiant presence.
Eileen weeps silently, her face marked by a small trail of fresh blood.
Desperate to stop the violence, Eileen pleads for forgiveness and denies any plotting.
The surrounding villagers fall to their knees, consumed by a paralyzing sense of fear. Elsia smiles with cruel satisfaction at the sight of their sudden and desperate pleas. Gripping Eileen's chin, Elsia mocks her for losing the spirit she showed earlier. Eileen prostrates herself on the ground, begging the princess to spare their lives. The gray-haired official calls out Elsia's name as the princess's anger boils over.
A quiet whisper sounds as the gray-haired man reports to Elsia.
She notes the village's temporary safety while reading a crumpled parchment. A cruel smile forms as she considers her father's impending panic. Discarding her whip, she dismisses the villagers as being merely lucky. Bloodied and weeping, Eileen is overwhelmed by relief at their survival. Memories of a sunset forest resurface as Eileen softly whispers Elsia's name.
Wounded but resilient, she urges another to flee for their eventual reunion.
The villagers are overcome with emotion, sobbing at their narrow escape. Grateful neighbors surround Eileen, thanking her for their miraculous preservation. Eileen smiles warmly, glad they trusted her sudden and urgent warning.
Laughter returns to the chief, Old Lady Henna, and Reza. The chief recalls their ancient history as servants of the Winter King.
A legend tells of a girl capable of communicating with spirits.
He explains that such a girl would eventually realize her true role.
Seeing her tears, he likens her to an exhausted overnight traveler.
He reiterates their proud lineage as descendants of the Winter God.
Feeling a divine presence, the chief notes the god still remembers them.
A collective blessing is called upon to support Eileen and her wool.
A sudden, pained cry escapes Eileen as a sharp agony takes hold.
Rosa gently applies a healing leaf to a long scar on Eileen's back.
Her thoughts turn toward the mysterious and elusive identity of the Winter King.
She winces in pain, her body trembling from the lingering trauma. A fractured vision of a blue-haired man shatters her disbelief in legends.
Amidst a swirling galaxy, Eileen realizes the deity is truly real.
She questions why the god remained silent while his people suffered.
Eileen wonders why their divine protector would ever choose to abandon them.
A sharp crack sounds as a heavy boot meets the frozen surface.
The Winter King wanders alone through the vast starlit expanse of space.
His stoic expression falters as cracks begin to spread across his skin.
He approaches a massive, glowing blue seed pulsating with a strange energy.
A shrill screech echoes as a crystalline creature breaks from its shell. The god watches the frantic creature with a gaze of quiet sorrow.
He continues his solitary trek across the shimmering, icy void of the cosmos.
The king's porcelain-like face fractures further under an unseen, immense pressure. The small, monstrous spirit shrieks again, its hollow eyes glowing with light. He looks at the agitated being, questioning what caused its sudden awakening.
Reaching out, he gently commands the spirit to return to its slumber.
A soft glow emanates from his hand as he touches the creature's eye. Within the crystalline orb, a small, innocent figure rests in deep peace. He tells the spirit to cease its struggle and accept the rest.
The god offers the being a respite, calling it an unwanted rest. Looking toward the stars, he laments that this is his only kindness.
He stands before colossal stone monuments floating in the heart of space.
A grim realization settles that the gods have abandoned the winter. A sudden blinding flash of lightning illuminates a jagged castle at night. A heavy boom vibrates through the tall, darkened palace windows.
A flash illuminates the pale, still face of a queen under a shroud. Elsia looms over the deathbed, her face hidden in the deep shadows.
She addresses her mother's corpse, expressing a mocking lack of genuine grief.
Walking away, she cruelly remarks on her father's supposed sadness to her companion.
The red-haired woman and her blonde guard enter the palace. Elsia resolves to visit her father after leaving her mother. Elsia walks through the hallway accompanied by Andreas and a maid.
A door opens, signaling the start of a tense family confrontation. The king looks up, visibly startled by his daughter's sudden arrival.
Elsia reaches out to clasp her father's aged and trembling hands. A message reflects on the king's supposed sorrow over his wife.
Elsia offers a shallow performative show of grief to her father. She promises to stay by his side during this mourning period. Elsia demands control over the inner quarters and her mother's authority.
She pulls a royal ring from her father's sweating ringled hand.
Her cold blue eyes remain fixed on her target with intensity.
Elsia maintains a mock bow while hiding her cruel, triumphant smile.
She insists on managing the funeral arrangements and taking total power.
The king accuses Elsia of funding her debauchery with royal bold. He condemns her for raising a personal army of common thugs. The king points at Andreas, calling him a scheming half-blood servant.
Andreas stands stoically while the king's expression turns to genuine horror.
The blonde man's pale eye reflects a cold and empty gaze. Elsia scoffs, unbothered by her father's desperate and angry accusations. She laughs at the king's sudden and hypocritical display of morality. The king asks how she can be so greedy so soon.
Elsia touches Andreas' chin, asserting her absolute ownership over the man.
She declares that the blonde guard belongs entirely to her alone.
Elsia tells her father to examine his own conscience before speaking.
The king orders Elsia to leave, refusing her demand for power.
She questions his ability to manage the palace without agreeing.
The king vows to manage alone until he finds another wife.
He refuses to let a daughter govern before her inevitable marriage.
A freckled maid watches the argument with a look of misery.
The girl flinches as Elsia approaches the door with murderous intent. A terrified blue eye reflects the approaching shadow of the princess.
Elsia grabs the maid by her hair, causing her to scream.
She mocks the king for already seeking a replacement for mother. The crying maid begs for forgiveness as Elsia insults her status.
Elsia commands Andreas to follow her away from the king's chamber.
Andreas looks back as Elsia makes a crude remark about father.
Apologies trail off as the group leaves the hallway in silence.
The king glares after his daughter, his face twisted in rage. A vertical view shows Elsia dragging the crying maid away cruelly. The king repeats his claim of knowing her true greedy schemes. Biting his thumb, the king vows to stop Elsia's ultimate betrayal. Hands tie a leather pouch shut by the light of a candle.
Eileen stares thoughtfully at the horizon with her bright green eyes.
A legend tells of the winter spirit king creating all life.
Narration describes the eternal cycle of the seasons starting with winter.
Sunlight bathes a scene of deer moving through autumn woods. An old image depicts robed figures worshiping a celestial snowflake symbol.
A map burns, signifying the loss of contact with the spirits.
The scene returns to the peaceful but isolated village in autumn. Eileen fears that Elsia or others will soon threaten her.
A single candle flickers against the weight of shattered legends.
Touching a map, she dreams of regaining their lost status. Eileen's green eyes reflect a newfound, unwavering sense of purpose. Night falls as a violent splash erupts in the lake. Eileen dives into the deep water, swimming toward the bottom.
Bubbles trail behind her as she reaches a submerged front.
An ancient crystalline statue of the Winter King stands underwater.
Underwater, Eileen gasps as she spots her shining target nearby.
The spirit stone glows from within a crevice in the rock.
Villagers discuss the risks of leaving the statue submerged indefinitely.
The chief and another man agree to wait for Eileen.
They worry about her return while cursing their Imperial enemies.
Bursting through the surface, Eileen gasps for air at night.
She looks back at the moonlit water, dripping and exhausted.
Eileen raises the glowing stone, joyfully announcing her successful discovery.
She examines the radiant crystalline artifact with a look of awe.
Hannah and a neighbor marvel at the legendary spirit stone.
A sudden, powerful earthquake strikes, causing the villagers to panic.
Eileen watches in shock as the submerged statue begins glowing.
A sharp crack sounds as the crystalline statue begins fracturing.
The stone figure shatters as a massive surge of energy erupts. The ruins lie shattered on the lakebed in the darkness.
Stunned and speechless, the group stares at the bubbling lake. The full moon shines over the silent, star-filled night sky.
Autumn colors bathe the mountains as a new day begins.
Eileen stands among the villagers, ready to begin her journey.
The chief asks Eileen if she must truly travel alone.
She insists this is a mission she must undertake herself. Eileen promises the chief she will return with the Empress.
Hannah scolds the chief's sentimentality, asserting that Eileen is ready.
Eileen bids the chief a cheerful and final farewell.
The villagers gather to wish Eileen luck on her quest.
Eileen waves goodbye, vowing to bring back their true king.
The spirit stone necklace symbolizes their hope for a guide.
A black-haired man stands over fallen enemies under the man.
He smirks at the persistence of the assassins tracking him.
The man observes that the Quodino Empire is growing desperate. His piercing blue eyes focus with a sharp, cold intensity. He pauses, noticing a drifting scent of food in the forest. A subtle, intrigued smile forms on the dark-haired man's face.
Eileen is suddenly confronted by a massive, shadowy monster.
She panics, having only intended to stop for a meal.
Eileen realizes the scent of human food attracted the beast.
She questions why her spirit stone isn't deterring the monster.
A heavy thud echoes as the beast's clawed foot mans.
The shadowy creature roars as Eileen screams in total terror.
Eileen laments that the chief's legends were dangerously incorrect. She swings her knife desperately as the monster lunges forward.
A heavy boom sounds as a boot pins the monster.
The black-haired man apologizes for interfering with her apparent death wish.
He explains that man-eating monsters eventually threaten innocent homes nearby.
They share a quiet meal together by the crackling campfire.
Eileen lies about her destination, claiming she seeks an uncle.
He scoffs at the madness of a child traveling alone.
Eileen indignantly asserts her maturity despite their small age gap.
He teases her for being angry instead of showing gratitude.
Eileen nervously considers if he expects a reward for saving her.
The man silently notes how delicious the warm stew tastes.
Realizing he truly helped, Eileen prepares to offer him payment.
She tearfully offers the village's collective savings as a reward.
The black-haired man watches her emotional outburst with mild amusement.
The full moon shines brightly over the dark silhouetted forest. While Eileen sleeps, the swordsman keeps watch by the fire.
Eileen marvels that he declined the money to protect her.
She smiles gratefully, calling the mysterious swordsman a good person.
He watches her sleep as a soft, kind expression appears.
The swordsman closes his eyes, momentarily lowering his god.
A sudden, firm grip tightens around the sword's cold hilt.
Bloody memories of a hanging woman haunt the man's mind.
A boy stands before a woman hanging from a tree.
A younger version of him cries out for his mother. A bloodshot eye stares back with a terrifying cracked iris.
He struggles to speak as the traumatic memory overwhelms him.
The ghost of his mother screams, calling for her son. He jolts awake, sweating from the intensity of the nightmare.
Ethereal, shadowy hands reach out to claim him from behind.
Dark figures loom over the man as he rests fitfully.
He glances around, questioning if it was only a nightmare.
The man realizes he drifted off while on guard duty.
A swift blade strike cuts through the deep, encroaching darkness. He stares into the night with a look of grim determination.
A dark spirit looms over the sleeping Eileen at campsite.
A shadowy hand reaches out to touch the girl's blanket.
The man's sword pierces the spirit's head with effect.
He stands victorious as the defeated monster dissolves into smoke.
He praises the incredible magical power imbued within his blade. Eileen whimpers in her sleep, begging for something to stop.
She cries out in distress, begging for mercy in her dreams.
The man prepares to cover Eileen with his own cook.
He sits watchfully under a sky filled with glowing petals.
He hopes his presence will banish her terrible, lingering nightmares.
An owl sits perched on a branch and a night.
The man groans softly, his blue eyes reflecting deep exhaustion.
Eileen continues to plead for the frightening visions to end.
He wonders if waking her would be the kinder choice.
She tearfully questions if a god exists to help them.
He sits alone, facing away from the fire's warm light.
His gloved hand rests heavily on his mean and butt.
The swordsman remains alert while Eileen sleeps restlessly near Matter.
The black-haired man notes Eileen's past hardships with a soft, observant gaze.
A gloved hand reaches out gently toward the sleeping girl.
Patting her head, the swordsman provides comfort as a quiet pat, pat sounds.
By the crackling campfire, the man watches over his companion in the forest.
Under the full moon, he sighs that their current situation is unavoidable.
Sunlight illuminates the mountain range as a new morning begins.
Eileen beams with joy, thanking the swordsman for leading her to safety. Exhausted, he listens as Eileen offers repayment and asks for his location.
He reveals his home is Cardia, dismissing any need for her gratitude. Eileen smiles brightly, realizing they might reunite since she is traveling there.
The swordsman looks perplexed, questioning her reason for visiting the Imperial capital.
Leaning in close, Eileen prepares to share a secret with the man.
He reacts with intense seriousness to her sudden, probing question.
Hesitating, Eileen calls out to the man once more.
She asks the swordsman if he has ever personally met the Emperor.
His blue eyes narrow sharply as he demands to know her motive.
An awkward silence falls between them as Eileen struggles to respond.
Clapping her hands, she nervously laughs off her odd question as simple curiosity.
Eileen waves a cheerful goodbye while the man watches her with confusion. She turns and begins running off toward her own destination.
The swordsman calls out, still seeking an explanation for her interest in royalty.
Pausing, she reveals her intent to negotiate directly with the Emperor himself.
He remains rooted to the spot, stunned by her bold and unlikely ambition. The swordsman stands alone as a humorous background of floating dogs appears.
A vibrant forest is identified by narration as the Lucullus Forest.
A horse-drawn wagon travels through the dense, sun-dappled wets.
The drivers notice something unusual, questioning each other about their surroundings.
One man looks around in a daze, wondering what he just saw.
They discuss the absurdity of anyone entering the spirit forest alone.
Eileen stops walking, wondering if she has finally encountered a real spirit.
Surrounded by glowing, winged fairies, she hears the disbelief of regular humans. Her necklace glows as she recalls that normal people cannot perceive spirits.
Eileen remembers that the Spirit Stone allows her to see these hidden beings.
Recalling her farewell, she remembers promising the village chief her successful return. She navigates the woods using knowledge from a story she once read.
Wiping sweat away, Eileen notes she arrived exactly when she intended. Her green eyes widen as she senses a powerful presence nearby. Standing by a crystal-clear lake, her spirit stone pulses with brilliant light. Peering through the foliage, Eileen excitedly identifies her goal.
She confirms she has reached the home of the Spring Queen for Manhwa.
Rushing forward, Eileen slips and tumbles down a small embankment.
She regains her footing in the vibrant meadow at the watersides.
Taking a deep breath, a soft phew escapes as she prepares herself. Eileen screams a desperate summons to the Spring Queen at the lake. Her voice echoes across the valley as she continues her loud plea.
She stands firm, shouting for the queen to hear her request.
Drawing a massive breath, a loud "tsu" sounds as she expands her lungs.
With a powerful cry, she declares that she has urgent news.
Eileen shouts at the top of her lungs about the man named Andreas.
Far away, the blonde-haired Andreas sits stoically by a castle window.
A massive splash erupts as a giant pink bud rises from the lake.
A beautiful woman in white emerges from the petals with a flourish.
The woman is officially revealed to be the Spring Queen Vernua. A sudden whoosh sounds as Eileen realizes this person is the Spring Queen. Eileen's green eyes widen in shock as a dark presence looms nearby. The queen leans in close, telling the girl she has some mirth.
A whoosh sounds as vines suddenly lift Eileen high above the war.
Eileen's face reflects pure agony as the vines tighten their hold.
The queen asserts there must be a good reason for calling her name.
Eileen lets out an as she is suspended helplessly by the vines. Vernua's eyes glow red as she demands the girl speak up quickly. She cold-heartedly warns that falling from this height would be fatal. Eileen shivers and sobs, completely at the queen's mercy.
Eileen tearfully explains that she lived a previous life.
She admits she read a book detailing the events currently transpiring.
A sharp sound echoes as the queen gets close to the terrified girl.
Vernua asks how she is supposed to believe such a wild story. Eileen lets out a pained as she struggles to continue speaking. Eileen cries out that she learned about the queen and Andreas together.
She pleads that Andreas's honesty is why she is being honest too.
Eileen mentions Andreas never lied once, making the queen freeze.
The queen's expression softens as she processes the name Andreas.
Vernua asks why a non-spirit is able to perceive her. A green-haired man explains he possesses eyes of both human and elf. Andreas stands in the water, confirming his vision allows him to see her.
The man reiterates that his sight is the reason for their meeting.
Andreas stands waist-deep in the water, looking up at the queen.
The Spring Queen hums thoughtfully while looking down at the intruder.
Vernua leans down close to Andreas's face to inspect him. She firmly states that he is not permitted to enter her domain. Andreas looks away, quietly acknowledging that he understands the restriction. A rhythmic splash sounds as he explains that despite the rudeness, he had to meet her.
Looking up sincerely, Andreas asks the queen to please forgive him. The queen's eyes widen as a sharp breath of surprise escapes her.
She asks if he fears the wrath of the angered Spirit King.
Andreas admits he planned to lie but ended up being truthful. The queen asks why he chose to tell the truth instead.
Andreas looks down, his expression somber and thoughtful.
He confesses that he simply did not want to lie to her.
Vernua stares back in stunned silence, her pink eyes shimmering. A gentle wind blows through Andreas's green hair as they stand together.
The queen hums softly, her gaze locked onto the man's eyes.
Andreas looks up and asks if she intends to Padasho.
A splash sounds as the queen suddenly moves Korim. A quick snap sounds as she firmly grasps his wet hand.
Vernua pulls him close with a faint, knowing smile.
The scene transitions to a beautiful plant-filled bridge over a river. Vernua asks why his master wants the King of Winter's attention.
Andreas sighs that the desire is simply a human thing.
The queen wonders aloud if that specific situation is happening again.
Vernua asks if he seeks the Winter King's song for power, and Andreas confirms it. Shocked, Vernua scolds him for approaching such a cold-blooded man for a foolish reason.
Andreas rests his head on her lap, his green hair fanned out across her dress. Looking down at him, Vernua's expression is filled with a somber, protective affection.
She gently strokes his cheek, whispering the name Andre as he sleeps. Drawing him closer, Vernua softly urges the sleeping man to come to her. Vernua gazes into his eyes with a look of deep, unmistakable longing. Andreas asks if her attention is a punishment, causing her to react with annoyance.
In the garden, she loudly denies it while Andreas laughs off her sudden outburst. Narrated text reflects on the complicated nature of human circumstances between them.
Andreas sleeps within a grand underwater chamber, surrounded by floating fish and blue light. A sharp sound echoes as Vernua's pink eyes suddenly snap open in the darkness.
Letting out a soft Vernua sits up and stretches after her rest.
Looking around the vast domed chamber, she wonders aloud where Andreas has gone. Andreas sits by a massive window, admiring the stunning beauty of the underwater palace. Vernua reclines nearby, and Andreas tells her she's even more beautiful than the palace.
He abruptly asks when he can meet the King of Winter, making her freeze.
Andreas admits his master has been rushing him to fulfill his cast. He worries he will be scolded if he returns home without any progress.
A quick sound marks the moment she watches him from across the chamber. Taking his hand with a sudden movement, she pulls him close to her side.
In a more intimate setting, the shirtless Andreas looks at her as she approaches.
Vernua explains that the King of Winter is not one to grant audiences easily. She holds him close, advising that he must wait for the right opportunity.
Firmly, Vernua forbids him from talking about his master while he is with her. Leaning in to kiss him, she warns that his success will change everything.
Her eyes glow with a fierce red light as she delivers a cryptic message.
A bubble declares that once he leaves, he will never be allowed to return. They discuss his master being a woman, and Vernua huffs that she won't help yet.
Shouts of "thief" and "catch him" echo through the palace's grand, sunlit corridors.
Panting heavily, Vernua runs through the halls as alarms sound all around her.
Spirit guards corner a dark-clad man in front of a massive, ornate door.
Vernua gasps in shock as she recognizes Andreas as the cornered intruder. Andreas looks down, shadows covering his face as the guards prepare to strike.
Defiantly holding a dagger by the door, the scene is marked as to be continued. Heavy breathing sounds fill the black void, emphasizing the intense chase.
The green spirit guards keep their weapons pointed at Andreas as he blocks the entrance. Vernua's terrified face is contrasted with Andreas's steady, determined gaze.
A single bubble in the darkness echoes her shocked call for Andre. The guards accuse him of trying to steal Renula, a sacred spirit treasure. They call him an ingrate for betraying the hospitality the queen showed him.
A guard declares that stealing from spirits is a capital offense punishable by execution.
Blades are held at Andreas' neck as the guards prepare to carry out the sentence. Shouting that they have it all wrong, Vernua desperately tries to intervene. She commands the guards to lower their weapons, stating Andreas was only doing his work.
A guard argues back, claiming they caught him forcing the palace doors upper. A massive clanging sound rings out as the door is struck with force.
The guards demand that he be honest with the queen about his intentions. They shout for him to confess his theft as massive vines spiral around them.
Andreas stares back with cold, silent eyes, refusing to yield to the guards' pressure.
Vernua commands the guards to lower their weapons immediately. A vision appears of Andreas and Vernua standing close together.
Vernua insists that she intended to give the sacred Renula to him.
The ornate red dagger known as Renula is held firmly. Handing over the weapon, Vernua declares that it now belongs to him.
The spirit guards gasp in shock at their queen's unexpected declaration.
Andreas looks somber as he begins to address Queen Vernilla. Vernua sighs that she already suspects his troubles involve those humans.
The green-haired man clutches the sacred dagger tightly to his hest.
A brilliant light erupts around them as Andreas kneels before the queen. Vernua warns that the spirit world's punishment is far too severe.
She reveals that the cold-hearted Winter King handles all spiritual discipline.
Vernua explains she lost her powers and remained imprisoned for a century.
Looming over Eileen, Vernua asserts her remaining power over human beings.
The queen abruptly ends the conversation, refusing to hear anymore. Vernua threatens Eileen for her careless words, asking if she is ready. Eileen pants heavily, sweating under the pressure of the queen's intense gaze.
Gasping for air, Eileen desperately whispers the name of the man, Andreas.
Eileen remains on her knees while massive vines spiral all around her.
The queen remains silent, her expression partially hidden in the shadows.
Vernua scoffs that Andreas was simply a faithful servant following orders. Eileen shouts a denial, arguing against the queen's view of his loyalty. Eileen claims Andreas is suffering because he believes he is unforgiven. Vernua rages that Eileen's claims from a book are total nonsense. The queen calls the girl's story about the book an impossible lie.
Eileen continues her explanation, noting the true nature of the Spring Queen.
Vernua stands encased in chains and vines, her expression remaining unreadable.
Looking up, Eileen asserts that the queen is actually pure heart.
Eileen describes the queen as being as innocent as a small child.
In a flashback, the tall Andreas stands beside the golden-haired queen.
Andreas looks on with a calm, steady gaze during the memory.
Vernua looks up at him with wide, curious pink eyes.
Andreas' voice echoes that her innocence made him feel quite guilty.
He admits that deceiving someone so pure would be a sin.
Vernua protests that she is far older and more experienced than him.
A soft brush sounds as Andreas gently touches her delicate cheek.
Andreas laughs softly, finding her reaction to his words rather amusing.
In the present, Queen Vernua begins to sob uncontrollably.
Eileen offers to tell Andreas that the queen is waiting for him.
Eileen stands firm, her green eyes shining with renewed determination. Tears stream down Vernua's face as she processes the girl's words. Eileen watches the queen's emotional breakdown with a sympathetic gaze. Eileen begins to explain the difficult truth about what Andreas is doing. A vision shows a red-haired woman holding Andreas in heavy chains.
Vernua tearfully asks about the true nature of his feelings for her.
Eileen pleads for the queen to try and believe her story. Vernua trembles, clutching her hands to her chest as emotions overflow. A desperate cry for Andre escapes the queen's trembling lips. Eileen mentions the Winter King, causing a shift in the atmosphere. A pained arg sounds as Vernua's power erupts in a violent surge.
Vernua is furious, questioning why all humans are equally greedy.
Eileen shouts a denial, claiming her only wish is to stop a certain plan. Eileen explains that the person responsible for the Queen's suffering, the future destruction of the Winter King, and Andreas's impending death are all the same individual.
Vernua's expression shifts into one of silent, growing shock.
Horrified, the Queen asks for the identity and motive of whoever is trying to kill Andreas. Eileen leans in close, asking if the Queen understands the real reason why Andreas approached her. Eileen questions why Andreas sought the Winter King and stole the sacred Renula dagger as a shadow falls over a smiling face. The red-haired princess of Arkan, Elsia, is identified as the person who now possesses the stolen weapon. Eileen reflects that the limitless greed of Elsia Elvernice will be the direct cause of Andreas's death. Eileen warns the Queen that Elsia will soon visit to offer a deal for a meeting with the Winter King. With a determined look, Eileen begs to take his place and meet with the Winter King herself.
Looking at Andreas through a window, Eileen promises the Queen will learn the words he failed to deliver.
In a memory, Elsia hums contentedly while clutching the dagger as Andreas stands silently in the background.
A quick movement sounds as the red-haired princess triumphantly lifts the blade toward the light.
Elsia smirks, noting that recovery is impossible for anyone cut by such a spirit-crafted weapon.
She remarks on how unbelievable it is that something so dangerous was ever created. Andreas remains silent as the red-haired woman comments on how clever the spirits are. A sharp look marks the moment Elsia narrows her blue eyes with a calculating gaze. Elsia notes that the Spirit Queen seems to have a genuine fondness for the green-haired man. Elsia mocks Andreas, expressing disbelief that he surrendered his precious sword to her so easily. Touching her earring, Elsia chides him for not begging the Spring Queen harder to meet the Winter King. Leaning in close to the green-haired man, she calls him Andre with a teasing, knowing smile. A brief, quiet pause follows her address as Andreas and Elsia stare at one another.
Elsia laughs, asking if he is embarrassed by her nickname and noting that he has a cute side.
Looking away, the green-haired man apologizes, explaining he is not used to being addressed that way.
Andreas looks her in the eye and firmly states that he would prefer to be called by his full name.
A shimmering vision of Queen Vernua appears as she softly speaks the name Andre. Standing alone, the green-haired man looks down with a somber and distant expression. Elsia sighs, telling Andreas that she finds his perspective to be ridiculously naive. She notes that his innocent nature is likely why nobles and spirits are so enamored of him.
Elsia decides aloud that she should go and meet with the Spring Queen personally.
Touching the sharp hilt of the blade, she vows to persuade the Queen in her own way. Elsie looks back with a sharp gaze, asserting that the Spirit Queen is more than just a woman in love. A grand, shimmering glass dome houses the Palace of Spring deep beneath the ocean waves.
Eileen explores the underwater palace, looking up in wonder as massive spirit fish swim past the glass.
Queen Vernua stands regally, holding a small bottle of red potion toward her guest.
Vernua explains that the potion will allow Eileen to see and hear spirits even without the energy stone.
Eileen stares at the small, glowing bottle in her hand with a look of pure amazement.
The golden-haired queen crosses her arms, watching the girl with a skeptical yet curious expression. A quick gulp sounds as Eileen uncorks the bottle and drinks the red liquid in one go. Excitedly, Eileen asks if they are now friends and reminds the queen of their promise to be honest.
Vernua hums softly as she begins to open a small, ornate wooden chest.
Eileen wonders silently if the item inside is the legendary love potion from the original story. Looking into the glowing chest, Eileen gasps in shock at the object resting inside. A stained glass window illustrates the novel's depiction of Elsia as the heroic princess who saved her people. The narrative describes how she was praised for deceiving the Winter King and obtaining the Amapatica potion for her country. Dark text reveals that Elsia ruthlessly took her servant, Andreas, hostage to exchange him for the potion. Stained glass shows Elsia commanding the Spring Queen to serve her goals of world domination while threatening Andreas. The window depicts the Winter King being blinded by the Amapatica potion and Elsia leaving him after gaining his power.
Mana remembers reading the novel from the protagonist's viewpoint, never realizing the inherent cruelty of the events.
Vernua explains how a certain person exploited and abandoned the spirits. Eileen recalls that the novel described Amapatica as a simple love potion. Vernua describes how the elixir ruthlessly devours the person's heart from within. Vernua clarifies its terrifying nature as Eileen trembles in fear.
Vernua asserts that such a violent reaction is the true nature of love.
Vernua questions Eileen's romantic experience as the girl reacts with awkward silence. Vernua explains the selfish and aggressive way that Amapatica activates.
Vernua admits she hesitated to turn Andreas into a mindless doll.
Vernua commands Eileen to take the dark, root-covered object. Vernua orders Eileen to force the item into the cold-hearted man's heart. The chained queen smiles joyfully while presenting the dangerous elixir.
Eileen rejects the violent plan, opting to talk things out instead.
Vernua's playful demeanor shifts as she suddenly seizes Eileen's hands.
Vernua insists on her method, mentioning the medicine Eileen already consumed.
A text bubble reveals the medicine carries a conditional memory erasing curse.
Eileen is left bewildered as Vernua abruptly releases her.
Eileen's eyes widen in pure horror as she shouts in shock.
Eileen demands an explanation while Vernua walks away humming contentedly. Vernua reflects on the pain of love as Eileen looks on helplessly. Vernua vows to find satisfaction only through her planned revenge. Vernua calls Eileen's name as her hand begins to glow with power.
Vernua initiates a teleportation spell to send Eileen to her destination.
Eileen lets out a sharp scream as she falls into a dark portal.
Vernua warns that Eileen will lose her memories without someone's love.
Eileen realizes her bag is left behind as the portal closes.
Eileen struggles within the closing portal as Vernua laughs at her predicament.
Eileen desperately asks if Andreas's love can actually break the curse. Vernua promises to provide the antidote once Andreas is successfully released.
Vernua offers a final, ominous warning to be careful on her journey. Eileen arrives at the Winter King's palace, questioning the Queen's sanity.
Eileen collapses in the snow, feeling the cursed medicine's physical effects.
Eileen rants about the absurdity of doing business with the Spring Queen.
Eileen begins to feel a sense of pity for the Winter King. A close-up shows the crystalline pendant glowing against Eileen's clother.
Eileen gathers her resolve and prepares to enter the silent castle.
Eileen walks toward the massive blue-tinted gates of the frozen fortress.
Eileen observes that the atmosphere is completely different from the Spring Palace.
Eileen notes the eerie absence of spirits or any living animals. Looking up at the tall towers, Eileen wonders if the king Atau.
Eileen's boots make a soft sound on the cold palace floor.
Eileen breaks into a run, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls.
Eileen comes to a sudden halt, sensing something in the darkness. Eileen removes her boots to move more quietly through the fortress.
Eileen runs barefoot, heading toward the bedroom described in the novel.
Eileen recalls that the king's chambers are located in the tallest tower.
High above, a silver-haired man silently watches Eileen's intrusion from the shadows. Eileen navigates through a grand, moonlit corridor filled with towering columns.
Eileen hopes to find the Winter King in a deep sleep. Eileen realizes that a conscious king would make her mission impossible.
Eileen pauses to admire a massive, intricate painting decorating the palace wall.
A mosaic depicts the deity responsible for the creation of winter.
Narration describes the inevitable cycle of seasons following the winter's end. Eileen reflects on how often she heard the creation story as a child. Eileen's widen in realization as she spots something unexpected. Confused, Eileen questions the bizarre nature of the scene before her. A loud boom sounds as Eileen views the shattered ice mask of the king.
Eileen wonders who would dare commit such an act within this fortress.
Eileen realizes the perpetrator's motive must be incredibly personal and malicious.
A memory of a mysterious woman's warning echoes through Eileen's mind.
Looking back, Eileen continues to puzzle over the king's current state. A gasp escapes as Eileen finds a silver-haired man standing right behind her. Startled, Eileen questions the identity of the tall, imposing figure. Eileen stares up at the silent man whose face is cast in shadow. Eileen wonders if the glowing-eyed man is truly the legendary Winter King.
The silver-haired man demands Eileen's identity and her method of entry.
Eileen stammers as the man asserts his refusal to let humans enter. The man makes a threatening gesture and orders Eileen to leave immediately.
Terror fills Eileen's eyes as she faces the man's cold fury.
A sudden thud sounds as Eileen shouts the secret name Heims Grazines.
Shocked, the man demands to know how she learned his private name. Eileen introduces herself and pleads for his temporary trust.
With tears in her eyes, Eileen declares her intention to help him. Eileen suddenly breaks into a run, heading straight toward the silver-haired man.
A dull thump sounds as Eileen presses her hands against the man's chest.
The silver-haired man reacts with visible confusion at Eileen's sudden physical contact.
A soft hum begins as Eileen's palms glow with a vibrant pink energy. A brilliant flash of light illuminates the hall as the spell activates.
The silver-haired man groans in sudden pain from the intense magical contact.
Eileen maintains her focus as the swirling light begins to envelop them both. Looking down in disbelief, the man realizes something fundamental is shifting.
Eileen's pendant glows with a blinding intensity, catching her completely off guard.
Eileen grits her teeth, pouring all her remaining strength into the magic. The snowy wind howls as the two figures stand locked together in the corridor. Overwhelmed by the magical strain, Eileen's vision begins to fade into darkness. A quick movement follows as the man reaches out to catch the fallen girl. The silver-haired man catches Eileen in his arms as she loses consciousness.
The man gazes down at the fainted girl with a somber, unreadable expression.
Eileen's hand limply clutches the man's cloak as her strength fails completely. Awakening momentarily, Eileen notes the change in the man's once shadowed eyes.
A close-up reveals the clear, piercing blue eye of the now-revealed king.
A crystal chandelier hangs from the palace's decorative high ceiling. A fireplace burns brightly, warming the room's white marble floor. Eileen slowly opens her eyes as she regains her consciousness. Eileen wakes up in a large bed under a white blanket.
Eileen sits up in bed, looking around the unfamiliar grand room.
Eileen's boots sit neatly on the floor near her bedside.
Eileen is relieved that she was neither killed nor exiled. Eileen panics as she remembers the conditional memory erasing curse. The Winter King looms over Eileen and sternly demands an explanation.
Eileen reacts with confusion to the king's demand for a full explanation.
Eileen looks up from the bed, appearing startled and cautious. The Winter King demands to know Eileen's identity and her method of entry. The silver-haired king commands Eileen to tell him everything with total honesty.
Eileen clutches her hands to her chest, looking deeply nervous and unsettled.
Chibi Eileen stares ahead with an expression of quiet, thoughtful contemplation.
Eileen trembles, finding the king's sheer presence to be incredibly intimidating. Eileen admires the king's handsome features while he stands in the light. Eileen gasps as she finally realizes she is facing the Winter King. The king looms in shadow as Eileen reacts with a nervous sound.
Eileen reaches down to retrieve something hidden within her clothing.
Eileen reveals the glowing dark crystal pendant hanging from her neck. Eileen introduces herself and states her firm intention to protect Ivergina.
Eileen asks the king to listen carefully to her long explanation.
A rhythmic sound of hoofbeats echoes as a horse gallops nearby. A lone rider approaches the massive gates of the Cardia Imperial Palace.
A guard frantically announces the emperor's return and orders the gates opened.
The heavy palace gates groan loudly as they begin to rise. The rider gallops through the courtyard at an incredibly high speed. Frantic officials rush to greet the emperor as he arrives on horseback.
Officials swarm the emperor with requests for approval while he demands proper greetings.
Stressed officials warn that tax and festival plans require his immediate signature. The emperor recalls Eileen asking for his help during a previous encounter. The emperor decides to prioritize handling the palace's many pieces of unfinished business. The emperor orders the relieved officials to meet him in his office. The black-haired emperor pauses, sensing a sudden shift in the palace atmosphere.
A dark silhouetted figure stands quietly against a stone palace wall.
The emperor narrows his sharp blue eyes, focused on a hidden threat.
A sound of heavy footsteps echoes through the silent palace grounds.
A masked knight kneels to report a successful mission to the emperor. The knight announces that the rebel, Count Kurgo, has finally been captured.
The emperor stands silently over the kneeling messenger in the shadows.
A close-up shows the emperor's focused expression as he listens to the report. Text reveals that these palace events occurred 4 days in the past.
The emperor notes how the palace atmosphere shifted during his long absence.
The scene shifts back to Eileen and the king in the tower. The silver-haired king listens silently with his eyes closed in quiet contemplation.
Eileen explains that Ivergina has struggled since the Winter King's sudden disappearance.
Eileen warns that Ivergina faces total destruction during the next possible invasion. Eileen insists that restoring the nation is their only chance to survive Elsia. Eileen requests help as the official representative of the land of Ivergina. Eileen pleads for the king to reveal himself and rebuild their lands. The silver-haired king looks away, seemingly indifferent to Eileen's passionate request. Eileen watches the king intently, waiting for any sign of his cooperation.
The king flatly refuses Eileen's plea to return and help Ivergina.
Eileen stares forward, completely stunned by the king's cold and sudden rejection. A look of absolute shock and disbelief fills Eileen's wide eyes. The king orders Eileen to stay while he investigates her palace intrusion. The king glares coldly as Eileen lets out a frightened yelp. Eileen continues her desperate plea, begging the king to reconsider his decision. The king listens coldly as Eileen asks if he is truly refusing her. Eileen is devastated, wishing the current reality was nothing but a dream. The silver-haired king remains cold and detached, showing no sign of empathy. Eileen fumbles nervously, trying to muster courage to speak further. Eileen appears deeply flustered, her face flushed with a nervous, hopeful energy. The silver-haired king stares blankly, his expression offering no warmth or acknowledgement. Eileen apologizes for her selfish attitude, but claims he is supposed to love her, though he flatly refuses. A chibi Eileen is stunned into silence by the king's unexpected rejection. Shocked beyond belief, the small Eileen lets out a cry of pure confusion. The scene shifts to the grand architecture of the Imperial Palace of Cardia. Lanterns illuminate a palace corridor where the sounds of chatter echo. Several maids enjoy a boisterous meal together at a large wooden table.
One maid tells another to hurry up and eat while the other asks to enjoy her dinner slowly.
A woman in tattered purple clothing walks past the laughing maids silently.
A maid demands water while the woman in purple flinches in fear at the sudden command.
Water splashes into a wooden mug as the servant fulfills the command. The woman in purple cowers, clearly terrified of the servants who mock her.
A maid pauses while drinking her water, her expression unreadable and cold.
Suddenly, the maid stands up with a violent motion, shocking the servant. A loud thud sounds as the woman in purple is shoved down. The woman groans in pain while a dark shadow looms over her.
The text identifies the fallen woman as Carolina, a former noble servant.
The group of maids giggles cruelly, remarking that there is nothing Carolina can do about her situation. They mockingly scold Carolina for bringing them cold water instead of boiling it first as she was told.
A dark-haired maid stares down at Carolina and asks if she wants them to die from stomach aches.
A sharp scream erupts as a maid grabs Carolina by her messiere.
The maid aggressively demands that Carolina reply when people speak to her while the woman sobs in pain. Carolina tearfully apologizes, explaining that she boiled the water but it grew cold while they were busy eating.
The head maid lets out a sharp, mocking laugh at the excuse.
She reminds the others how Carolina acted the same way when she was the head of the Empress's palace.
Turning her attention back to the floor, the maid asks Carolina if she remembers what she did.
Carolina's eyes widen as she remembers the cruelty of her own past.
A vision shows Carolina in her former glory, looking down on others.
Carolina recalls claiming the maids were too stupid to understand her and ordering that they be whipped. A maid points out that Carolina doesn't seem to like being scolded about water temperatures now. Another maid asks Carolina if she still doesn't understand her lowly position washing their underwear. The head maid's eyes glow with malicious, vengeful intent while she speaks. The head maid declares that idiots who cannot understand simple things deserve to be whipped.
The group orders for Carolina to be held down and gathered tools to ensure she never talks back again.
A maid brandishes a metal rod, vowing to make Carolina realize the weight of what she has done.
Terror fills Carolina's face as the reality of the coming blow hits. Screams fill the room as the maids carry out their brutal punishment.
The sounds of pain echo as the brutal beating of Carolina continues.
A sudden movement stops the striking rod midair, surprising the maids.
The black-haired emperor appears, watching the scene with a calm, piercing gaze.
The black-haired emperor casually asks if his presence has caused everyone a lot of trouble.
The maids immediately bow, addressing him as His Majesty while acknowledging his presence.
The head maid explains that they were the previous empress's maids and Carolina was the one who abused them.
She describes how Carolina treated them worse than animals, noting that one person even became crippled.
The maid thanks the emperor for the opportunity to avenge themselves since he ascended to the throne.
The emperor smiles thinly and states that he would like to speak with Carolina alone. The emperor asks to be excused while Carolina groans on the floor.
A soft pat sound echoes as the door closes behind the maids.
Carolina trembles violently while letting out a long, pained breath of air. Carolina glares with wide, terrified eyes, calling the emperor a despicable man. A heavy thud sounds as the emperor drops a blood-soaked sack. Blood seeps from the bag with a slow, chilling, spreading sound. Carolina lets out a piercing scream as she recoils in absolute terror.
A sudden thud resonates as the emperor watches her horrified reaction coldly.
Carolina stares at her own hands, realizing the blood is still warm. A heavy sound of shock echoes as she realizes it is a head.
The emperor smiles thinly, saying he thought she would like to say goodbye.
Carolina shouts at him, calling him a cold-hearted monster for his cruelty.
Carolina gasps for air as large tears begin to fall from her eyes.
Carolina desperately begs for her life, admitting she was a bad person.
A soft clutch sound accompanies her plea as she begs him to kill her.
The emperor's hand moves forward with a quiet sliding sound toward her.
He firmly grabs her hand, addressing her as Empress with a chilling smile.
Carolina looks up in confusion while the emperor holds her bloodied fingers. The emperor lets out a soft laugh at her desperate request for death. He refuses to let her die, using her children's lives as leverage. A single tear falls with a soft plop as Carolina stares in shock. Carolina gasps as the emperor's words hit her with crushing weight. The emperor coldly repeats his refusal to let her die without permissions.
Carolina looks down at her torn purple dress with an expression of despair. Carolina pleads for permission to change out of her tattered noble garments.
The emperor's blue eyes narrow as he flatly denies her simple request.
A soft sliding sound precedes his command for her to perform lowly duties.
The emperor's hand roughly grips her face with a sudden, firm sound.
He asks if she finds him despicable while staring into her house. The emperor warns her to be careful with her already ruined dress.
He turns away, telling her she will suffer the ultimate humiliation otherwise.
The emperor promises to spare the youngest royalty if she chooses to live.
He pauses to mention the fate of her remaining relatives in the palace.
Carolina trembles as he orders her to watch her kin be slaughtered.
A series of echoes fill the dark room as screams resound.
The narrative shifts back 17 years to the Imperial Palace of Cardia. A quick pattering of footsteps sounds as a young boy runs outside.
A woman calls out to the boy Rex, telling him to stay.
Rex stops with a quick sound as he notices someone in the garden.
7-year-old Rex marvels at the warmth and brightness of the sunlit garden.
Rex gives the woman a joyful hug with a soft, tight squeeze. Rex points out how much better the garden is than their home. The woman smiles sadly, confirming that their home is indeed very dark.
A sudden bustle of noise startles them as the woman pulls Rex away.
Rex looks back with wide eyes, wondering who has entered the garden.
A grand noblewoman in a red dress appears with a large entourage. The noblewoman twitches in surprise as she spots the two intruders. She commandingly orders the woman and child to stop where they are. Rex clutches the woman's dress tightly with a soft, worried sound. The woman bows deeply, offering a humble greeting to the reigning empress. Empress Carolina questions since when lowly stablemaids were allowed in the garden. Young Prince Rex claims they were careless and promises they will leave immediately. Empress Carolina asks her head maid what punishment such servants deserve for intruding.
The dark-haired head maid suggests whipping as the appropriate punishment for their mistake.
The Empress tells Prince Rex she will demonstrate how to handle misbehaving servants. Prince Rex complains that study time ended and he wants no more classes today. Empress Carolina gives a silent, sharp look of command toward her head maid. A black-haired boy with blue eyes watches the growing tension with intense dread.
The head maid reaches out aggressively toward the woman and the black-haired boy.
A sharp slap sounds as the head maid strikes the woman across the face. Rex cheers with excitement, shouting, "Ooh," while watching the woman being struck.
Another slap rings out, causing the black-haired boy's anger to flare visibly.
The black-haired boy screams for the head maid to stop her assault immediately.
He grabs the maid's arm, shouting for them not to touch his mother.
Rex encourages the maid to hit her harder and send her body flying.
The black-haired boy's eyes glow with a deadly, murderous promise to kill him.
Prince Rex lets out a frightened yelp as the Empress narrows her eyes.
Empress Carolina disgustedly labels the child as nothing more than a lowly stable boy.
The head maid seizes the boy, noting his defiant nature matches his mother's. She prepares to punch him, intending to silence his cheeky mouth for good. The mother cries out in terror, begging for them to stop the violence.
A sickening, heavy thud sounds as blood splatters across the dark scene. The mother screams again as more blood sprays with a sudden, wet splatter.
The black-haired boy appears battered and dazed, his face shadowed with pain. He looks up in confusion, questioning what just happened during the brutal confrontation.
He finds his mother weeping on the ground while shielding her face in shock.
The head maid ignores the boy's cries for his mother while cleaning her hands.
The boy stares with a gaze filled with cold, blue, murderous intent.
He lunges at the maid, screaming his desperate intent to kill her.
A thunderous command to stop immediately echoes through the palace garden.
The Emperor demands to know what the cause of all the racket is.
The black-haired boy is frozen in place by the Emperor's sudden, imposing appearance.
The Emperor looms over the gathered group with a stern and commanding presence.
The Empress furiously accuses the servant of bringing her son there to show off. She rants about the insults she and the prince must endure from the servants.
The Emperor takes her hand, softly telling the Empress to calm her agitation.
He reassures her that her noble reputation remains perfectly untarnished despite the intrusion.
He praises her as the most noble lady and the mother of his heir.
The Emperor coldly orders the woman and child to return and reflect on themselves.
The mother helps her son walk away in heavy, silent defeat and gloom.
The black-haired boy looks back one last time with a lingering, vengeful stare. A memory depicts the Emperor and Empress taking their young son for a walk.
A lone carriage sits outside the grand, silent architecture of the Imperial Palace.
An ornate chair sits empty in a quiet moonlit hallway within the palace.
The black-haired boy looks down with a somber and deeply brooding expression.
He sits alone on the cold stairs outside a heavily ornate closed door.
Muffled sounds of a struggle and movement echo from within the private room.
Inside, clothes are tossed about while a pained follows a harsh accusation.
The Emperor rages at the woman, questioning how much longer he must endure selfishness. He demands to know what she was doing wandering in that place.
A sudden tugging sound resonates as the Emperor roughly grabs the woman's hair, calling her a derogatory name.
The Emperor accuses her of scheming to use her son to seize the throne, which she desperately denies.
Tears stream down the woman's face as she insists she has never harbored such thoughts.
A series of thuds and pained groans echo during a violent struggle on the bed.
The Emperor orders her to keep her voice down and remain in the villa the Empress provided.
He cruelly labels her a useless woman and warns her not to ruin the Empress's mid.
A soft rustle sounds as the Emperor stands and pulls on his white shirt.
Distraught and disheveled, the woman begs His Majesty to allow her and her son to move far away.
The black-haired Emperor turns back with a cold, piercing, blue-eyed stare of silent judgment. She pleads to live quietly in the countryside, promising that Prince Rex's brother's identity will remain a permanent secret.
The Emperor scoffs at her naive belief that Empress Carolina would ever let a boy of Imperial blood live in peace.
He forbids her from dreaming of escape, stating he intends to keep her close for his own amusement.
The Emperor blames her stupidity for her daily whippings, claiming he is the one who suffers when she irritates the Empress.
The woman weeps silently, lamenting that she has fallen so low as to be underestimated by common maids. A soft crinkle sounds as she clutches the sheets, cursing the arrogant Empress and her powerful family background. The Emperor commandingly tells her to act properly now that she understands the reality of her situation. He leaves the room with a final warning that he will personally deliver her next punishment.
A quick pattering of footsteps sounds as the Emperor walks past the black-haired boy waiting outside.
The Emperor pauses for a moment of silent, heavy tension before the young boy.
The young boy stares at the Emperor's boots with a somber, downcast expression.
The Emperor calls the child bothersome while the boy's eyes flare with a sudden, glowing blue intensity.
Narrated thoughts express the boy's deep shame at carrying the blood of such a disgusting man.
A cold, vengeful gaze burns in the black-haired boy's glowing blue eyes.
A carriage speeds away as a voice orders a sudden return to the palace. The boy's internal monologue reveals his desperate prayer to one day kill the man himself.
Dark shadows swirl around text explaining that his vengeful wish went ungranted.
The boy watches a funeral from afar, noting the king passed away the following year.
Empress Carolina stands over the woman and child, casting a long, shadow-filled silhouette.
Carolina peers over her fan with a look of extreme, cold superiority. The Empress decides to let the woman live only because she lacks the status of a noblewoman.
She mocks their lowly bloodline, claiming the boy will never grow to be a threat to her son's position.
The mother offers a submissive thanks for her kindness while shielding her angry, black-haired son.
A chilling smirk plays across Empress Carolina's lips behind her ornate fan.
Narration reflects the Empress's relief that she will no longer have to see the woman's face.
A quick snap sounds as Carolina closes her fan, vowing to send them somewhere fitting their stature.
The Empress orders the two to be sent to the most wretched slave caves on the continent. Terror grips the mother and son as an oppressive, dark aura surrounds them.
A grim notification confirms the beginning of an endless, waking hell for them.
A grand ice blue castle stands tall beneath a heavy, swirling snowstorm.
A series of rhythmic click-clock sounds echo as a blue-haired man walks through a hall.
The tall, blue-haired figure moves gracefully through the empty, sunlit corridor.
He pauses in the center of the hall, looking up with a calm expression. The blue-haired man stands alone over a massive, cracked mural depicting a divine figure. He thinks somberly about how his reason and memories are slowly fading over time.
The man's handsome face is shadowed as he dwells on his lost identity. He recalls a legend regarding the birth of the earth and the salvation of winter.
A soft sliding sound accompanies his hand reaching out toward the ancient, cracked mural.
The blue-haired man laments his inability to even remember his own name or purpose.
A pink-haired girl hides behind a large pillar, watching him with silent curiosity.
The girl peeks out cautiously, admitting to herself that she was in quite a rush earlier. The pink-haired girl hides, cringing as she recalls her rude behavior toward the man.
She reflects that she would likely be angry if someone treated her similarly.
The blue-haired man stands with his back turned while observing a massive, intricate mural. Snow falls outside while she watches him silently from the safety of the corridor. She wonders to herself if the cold Winter King is even capable of falling in love.
She questions how the character Elsia manipulated him, noting he is not technically a human.
A sudden command to leave interrupts her thoughts, making her look up in surprise.
She is visibly shocked to see the man's cold and distant expression directed toward her. She nervously wonders if he realized she was watching him as he walks away.
The blue-haired man continues walking through the palace while the girl peeks from behind a pillar. She finally reveals herself and asks him when he first realized she was following him. He admits he knew the entire time and demands to know her reason for following.
An awkward laugh sounds as she tries to maintain her composure in his stoic presence.
She continues laughing nervously while he stands with his arms crossed, completely unmoved.
A quick thump sounds as she suggests they must speak to truly get to know each other. He bluntly rejects her while she expresses her deep frustration to herself.
She attempts to laugh off his rejection while trying to keep the conversation alive.
He ignores her and continues walking, prompting her to shout for him to wait. Her face shows her growing desperation as she begs him for just a single minute. He flinches in surprise when she suddenly screams the name Himes at the top of her lungs. A sharp look of annoyance crosses his face as he stops to face her again.
He issues a stern and immediate warning for her never to use that name again.
The blue-haired man looms with a chilling aura while his black cape billows behind him.
She responds with a stubborn and defiant look, refusing to be intimidated by his presence.
She reminds him that she must stay until his investigation into her arrival is complete. She argues that any proper investigation should begin by talking to the person involved. She tells him she understands his confusion regarding the unfamiliar emotions he is feeling. She warns him that his problems will not be solved by simply running away. The girl's breathing becomes heavy as she struggles to keep up with the man's pace. The blue-haired man looks back one last time with a heavy and somber expression.
She gasps in surprise, questioning if he truly asked her to repeat her bold statement.
Blushing deeply, she clutches her dress while stammering about the idea of him loving her.
He looks completely confused and asks her to clarify exactly who she is talking about. Her face turns bright red as she finally manages to identify herself as the person.
The two stand in the vast moonlit hall during a moment of profound, awkward silence. He makes a sudden, graceful movement that startles her as the scene shifts.
A loud thud sounds as she bows deeply, apologizing while insisting she has a valid reason. She pleads for him to listen to her explanation, confident that he will eventually understand.
She looks around in utter confusion when she realizes the space before her is empty.
A lone leaf drifts across the floor after the man vanishes into thin air. She screams in total frustration and grabs her hair because he escaped her again. She rants that falling in love is not a big deal and requires no favors.
He watches her from above, dryly questioning if she feels any embarrassment for her behavior.
Her final scream of frustration echoes through the grand arches of the palace exterior.
The blue-haired man's face is cast in shadow as he looks away with a reflective gaze.
A cozy fire crackles while bread and fresh fruit wait on a nearby table.
A loud crunch sounds while the girl lies awake and frustrated in her bed.
She stares at the ceiling in contemplation, finding the current turn of events very odd. She recalls the novel's plot where the Winter King becomes devoted to Elsia after a potion.
A stained glass mural depicts Elsia's destiny as a hero and empress beside the king.
Stained glass mural depicts the Empress rising to power through spirit support.
The pink-haired girl lunges through the snow, frustrated by the king's lack of cooperation and his deviation from the novel.
Her green eyes widen as a new, darker realization begins to form.
Kneeling in the snow, she wonders if she made a mistake and why her plan didn't take root.
She desperately tries to figure out the difference between herself and the original heroine, Elsia. Trembling with shock, she refuses to believe that she has failed so completely. She hysterically compares her physical traits to Elsia's, wondering if her smaller stature is the reason for his lack of interest.
Distressed and sweat-drenched, she insists she must have overlooked a vital piece of information. A look of sudden epiphany crosses her face as she turns toward the distance.
A vast cosmic dimension is filled with many glowing blue doors floating in the void.
The blue-haired man sits alone on a massive star-patterned throne within the dimension.
Narration explains his inability to sense a certain presence anywhere in the world or other dimensions.
He stares mournfully into space, questioning if a specific person has truly vanished forever. The man mocks his own foolishness for expecting anything after being abandoned for thousands of years.
A pale hand begins to crack and turn into jagged white ice.
He smiles sadly while his arm freezes, noting the cruelty of such a slow, painful end.
Hunched over on his throne, he admits it would be better to simply perish instantly. A loud bang sounds as the palace doors are thrown wide open.
The pink-haired girl stands at the door, shouting with a look of absolute realization. The blue-haired man looks back in stunned silence at her sudden appearance. A look of renewed, fierce determination crosses the girl's face.
She runs across the glowing floor, claiming she has finally identified the problem.
He asks how she entered his room, but she explains the doors opened automatically as she approached. Confusion fills her green eyes when she realizes he didn't actually open the door for her. The man looks back at the entrance, baffled by why the room allowed her inside. He questions why the Spirit King's room would permit an outsider, while she worries she did something wrong. He turns away with a sudden, sharp movement of his head. The double doors remain closed in the silent, starry hallway.
Narrowing his eyes suspiciously, the man prepares to ask another question.
When asked how she found his room, she cheerfully credits her knowledge of the novel. He rubs his forehead in total exhaustion, claiming she continues to make no sense.
She begs for a minute to speak, claiming she knows why his love isn't working properly.
A look of intense, cold annoyance shadows the man's face. He admits he still doesn't understand her while looking completely drained. His eye suddenly widens in shock as the girl makes a bold move.
The pink-haired girl surprises the king by pulling him into an unexpected, passionate kiss.
Murals recount how Elsia once drugged the king with a love potion while he slept.
The art shows him waking up and immediately falling in love with his captor.
Stained glass scenes depict their commitment being sealed by a kiss on the lips. The text emphasizes that he fell for the one who gave him the potion.
Light sparkles around the image of the faded couple's piss.
Inspired by the mural, the girl believes the kiss was the missing element she needed.
She leans over him on the throne, pulling him close to repeat the legendary scene.
The two share a silent, intimate embrace as she initiates the kiss. Her long hair flows as she holds the king's face firmly. Closing her eyes, she feels a sense of triumph as if she has succeeded.
Light glimmers in the void as the moment of silence stretches on. She pulls away in horror when she realizes he is staring at her without response.
Sweat-drenched and pale, she realizes her gamble did not have the intended effect. The blue-haired man watches her with a calm, stoic, and unsettling gaze.
The pink-haired girl reaches up and cradles the man's face in her hands.
She pulls the blue-haired man into a sudden, firm kiss within the glowing hall. A startled gasp escapes her as she pulls away from the king in shock. The blue-haired man angrily demands to know what she thinks she is doing. He sits back on his throne looking completely stunned while she stands frozen. A heavy silence falls as they stare at each other in total disbelief. Moving with stiff, mechanical steps, she begins to shuffle away from him. She continues her awkward retreat, leaving him sitting alone in the starry void.
The blue-haired man watches her depart with a look of lingering bewilderment.
Her boots hit the floor as a heavy thud sounds during her hasty exit.
The large palace doors swing open as she rushes toward the palace hallway. She nervously insists that the door opened on its own without any force.
A hysterical laugh echoes through the hall while she covers her face in shame.
A soft sound marks the closing of the massive, starry double doors. She stands alone in the corridor, looking completely defeated and overwhelmed.
Shadows fall over her face as she reflects on her reckless behavior.
She berates herself for her foolishness, wondering what she was thinking.
She runs away, crying out that she will die from pure embarrassment.
Alone on his throne, the blue-haired man stares upward with a pensive gaze. He looks down at his hand, sensing a strange and unfamiliar warmth. He reflects on how his painful seizures suddenly and mysteriously stopped. A look of realization enters his eyes as he blinks in surprise. He walks through his star-tiled hall, his long cape trailing behind him.
He ponders why his palace would allow an outsider inside without his permission.
He notes that his room is a mysterious sanctuary meant for him alone. A quick thump sounds as he feels a sudden pulse within his chest.
He clutches his heart, wondering why it is racing so fast for her. The image of the pink-haired girl lingers vividly in his mind. He remains silent, lost in contemplation about her unexpected intrusion.
He observes a series of floating windows containing ancient artifacts and relics.
Inside a glass dome, a small, bound object rests on a pedestal.
He realizes that the suspicious entity did not actually devour his heart.
The girl identifies herself as Eileen and declares she has come to save him.
A loud thump sounds as she lunges forward and touches his chest.
A brilliant flash of light erupts between the two as they connect.
The girl suddenly loses consciousness and begins to slump toward the floor.
He quickly catches her, holding her securely before she can fall.
A small, bound object falls from her and rolls across the gridded floor.
He looks down at the unconscious girl with a silent, heavy expression.
He narrows his eyes, questioning if this could be the work of Vernua.
A soft sound follows as he lifts Eileen into his ows. A faint glow emanates from the jewel hanging around her neck. He looks at her face and wonders about her true identity.
He questions why she possesses a spirit stone made of sacred soil.
The blue-haired man stands isolated within the vast, dark dimension.
He takes a slow, deliberate step forward on the glowing tiled floor.
He exhales slowly, still reeling from the shock of a human kiss.
He sighs, admitting to himself that nothing feels normal anymore. Narration warns that the world of winter is on the verge of collapse.
Snow falls heavily over the title card as the chapter concludes. Snow falls heavily over the spires of the kingdom of Arkan.
Strained grunts of ha and ah echo through the training yard.
A brown-haired girl with freckles blows on her cold red hands.
The red-haired princess lets out an intense cry while swinging her sword.
She lunges forward, striking a wooden shield held by a bearded man. The man praises the princess for her considerably improved swordsmanship skills. She notes her lack of arm strength and current physical fatigue. He insists her power is extraordinary for a woman's physical stature. A look of sharp, cold intensity narrows her bright blue eyes. The man looks visibly nervous as a bead of sweat falls.
Tossing her sword, she asks if he trains for fun.
Narration describes the young emperor who usurped his nation's throne.
The freckled girl exhales a cold mist while waiting in the snow. The princess wipes sweat from her brow with a determined look.
Narration notes the emperor's strange lack of scandals with surrounding women.
Text continues explaining that many beauties typically surround the powerful ruler.
Snow drifts softly through the pale, cloudy sky above the kingdom.
Fur-clad, she reflects on becoming a useful piece to govern the nation. A glimpse of long green hair appears through the falling snow. Andre approaches the red-haired woman and calls her princess. She comments on the abnormal snowstorm occurring during the autumn season.
Narration observes that the winter weather has become increasingly strange yearly.
She asks Andre for his opinion on the envoy from Arcadia.
Contemplation fills her gaze as she reflects on the emperor's arrival. A warm, bright fire crackles inside a grand stone fireplace. She reads a letter about princesses being welcomed into the empire. The text describes the empire's plan to introduce their culture continent-wide.
Her eyes narrow while questioning the true purpose of the exchange.
She tells Andre the cultural exchange is actually for taking hostages. She laughs hysterically while crumpling the invitation in her hand. Andre believes fate is pushing him toward an opportunity with the emperor.
She orders Andre to prepare for their departure in half a month.
Andre bows deeply to the princess as she sits reekily. Shadows fall over her face as she watches Andre walk away. She reaches out and grips Andre's forearm with a sudden snap.
She calls out Andre's name as she pulls him back firmly.
Andre looks back at her with a calm and stoic expression. Tension builds as the princess looks up at him with intensity. She leads him by the hand toward the warm, glowing fireplace. She grips his sleeve, anticipating their meeting with the emperor. She declares her desperate need for the spirit world's power. White text against a dark abyss promises that she will wait.
She smiles darkly, waiting to meet the winter king or queen.
Andre explains that the spirits are angry over the stolen Renula. He admits he needs more time to contact the spirits again. Her hand suddenly shoots up to grab Andre's shirt collar. A loud thud sounds as she slams Andre against a desk. She demands he sacrifice royalty or priests to serve her needs. She commands Andre to kill or seduce others for her benefit.
Andre remains silent as he stares down with a heavy gaze.
A look of sharp intensity narrows the red-haired woman's blue eyes.
She reaches out and tells the man she has a soft spot for him.
A dark smoke billows as she warns of consequences if he fails her. A sudden quick tap sounds as she touches the nervous man's forehead.
Surrounded by dark roses, she cryptically reveals she planted something inside him.
A chilling final warning suggests that he might end up exploding. The scene shifts to the frozen, towering spires of the Grand Winter Palace.
A rhythmic thumping sounds while Eileen huddles miserably under a thick white blanket.
Eileen looks up with a terrified expression, panicking about her next move. She's haunted by the memory of Haim's cold and indifferent gaze. She screams in total frustration, wondering how anyone could be so emotionless. She fumes, imagining a world where he kneels and swears his loyalty. She recalls him dragging her away like a sack of laundry instead. Eileen grows horrified, suspecting he is only interested in beautiful, elegant women. She pulls herself together, reminding herself she isn't here for a romance. Standing tall, she vows to stop the Winter King from being ruined. She hides her face again, acknowledging her secret goal to restore Ivergina.
She pumps her fist, declaring that winter is the pride of her land.
A soft sigh escapes her as she tries to steady her nerves.
Her gaze sharpens as she questions the source of her lingering anxiety.
She throws off the blanket, deciding to demand her freedom from him.
She pauses for a moment to neatly fold her bedding before departing.
Heavy thumps echo through the hall as she marches forward with determination.
A gentle breeze passes as she suddenly senses a mysterious presence nearby. Eileen stops and looks back over her shoulder with a confused expression.
A glowing blue orb of light floats silently in the middle of the corridor. A small, adorable ice spirit with yellow eyes stares back at her.
Eileen pauses in surprise, wondering if the creature is some kind of genie.
She gasps in wonder, realizing that spirits actually live within the palace.
Soft pops sound as several more tiny spirits gather around her boots.
Eileen laughs with pure joy as the spirits flutter and play around her. She blushes, overwhelmed by how incredibly cute the little creatures are.
She reflects on finding something so charming in such a cold place.
A brilliant, warm light begins to glow from between her cupped hands.
Eileen stands in a massive, sunlit hall filled with majestic stone arches.
She looks around in complete awe at the incredible sights before her. A sharp crack sounds as a large ice crystal begins to shatter.
A majestic, winged ice spirit emerges from within the frozen structure.
Beautiful bird-like spirits take flight, soaring through the air around the girl.
Eileen stands dwarfed by a massive, glowing ice dragon spirit in the courtyard.
She wanders through a magical forest of crystalline, glowing white trees. She is struck by the breathtaking beauty of the hidden winter palace. Twirling around, she notes how the palace matches the murals of her village. Touching the ice dragon, she realizes her ancestors' legendary stories were true.
A tiny spirit nuzzles her cheek, making a soft sound of affection.
Eileen laughs happily as the playful spirits crowd around her head. She senses someone approaching and reaches out to ask him the way.
Himes appears silently behind her, watching her with a stoic expression.
Eileen blushes deeply, stammering out his name in her sudden shock.
The blue-haired king looks down and tells her it is time to sleep.
Eileen watches in shock as Himes manipulates a massive floating ice crystal.
Himes focuses intently while Eileen stares at the glowing strands of light.
Glowing ice shards fly through the air under Himes' silent command. Eileen gasps in shock as she realizes the extent of Himes' power.
Himes maintains a detached, cold expression throughout the magical display.
A sharp crack sounds as a bird spirit is frozen in ice.
Eileen lunges forward, grabbing Himes' arm to stop his actions.
Himes looks down at the girl with a heavy, silent gaze.
Shadows fall over Eileen's face as her frustration begins to boil over.
Eileen questions why Himes is heartlessly freezing every spirit in sight.
A tiny spirit touches Eileen's cheek before she can react.
Eileen watches sadly as the small, glowing spirit flutters toward Himes.
The tiny creature nuzzles Himes' cheek with an affectionate gesture. Himes catches the small spirit, holding it delicately in his palm. Eileen stands horrified as the small spirit shatters into ice shards. Eileen screams at Himes to please stop his cold-hearted actions. The pale, cold sky hangs over the grand palace arches. Eileen and Himes stand isolated among several frozen spirit statues.
The courtyard becomes a graveyard of frozen spirits under Himes' power.
Himes looks on with a stoic, unfeeling expression amidst the ruins.
Fury flashes in Eileen's green eyes as she confronts the king.
A soft sound follows as Eileen clenches her fist, demanding why. Eileen asks why he would freeze the spirits he calls family.
Himes reflects privately that the spirits must remain asleep for thou.
Himes turns the accusation back on Eileen, calling her the problem. Eileen reacts with confusion, questioning how she could be at fault.
Himes explains that her presence has awakened dormant spirits indoors. Eileen stands firm, her expression hardening as she listens to him. Himes accuses Eileen of boldly trying to exploit the spiritkin's heart.
Eileen's eyes widen as Himes forbids her from approaching Lucullus again.
Swirling blue energy gathers as Himes officially banishes Eileen from the palace.
Eileen shouts in protest, calling his decision a cruel injustice.
Eileen argues that she has been honest and followed every command. Eileen demands to know why he is putting the spirits to sleep.
A soft sound follows as Eileen's hand trembles from mounting frustration.
Eileen recounts her people's suffering while the king remained absent.
Eileen's voice breaks as she asks where he was during the invasion.
Eileen glares at the king, asking why he abandoned his people. Crystalline ice begins to spread across Himes' face and neck.
Eileen recalls the lonely journey she took to find the camp.
Tears fall as Eileen acknowledges Himes as the king of kings.
A mosaic depicts a regal king who understands the weight of promises. Eileen wonders why such a powerful ruler would ignore his nation.
Eileen lets out a shaky breath as she faces her deep disappointment.
Eileen laments that the king has chosen to live in isolation.
Eileen criticizes the king's irresponsibility in forcing his spirits to sleep.
Eileen observes the king staring at the ruins of his world. Eileen questions if the king is simply wallowing in self-pity.
Loud cracking sounds echo as Himes' body begins to transform into ice.
Eileen vows to stop seeking help from a king who is broken.
Eileen yells that she will not leave until she hears an explanation regarding Ivergina. Swirling blue energy surrounds Himes as he prepares to unleash his power.
Eileen freezes with shock as the intensity of the scene suddenly shifts. Heims grimaces in pain as crystalline ice begins to consume his body.
Eileen trembles with fear while Heims stands tall, radiating a dark energy. Heims smiles coldly while Eileen stares up at him in utter horror.
Heims reflects that the girl before him is a remarkably fearless human.
Eileen stares with wide, terrified eyes as the atmosphere becomes dangerously heavy.
Heims notes Eileen's fearlessness again while his power continues to grow significantly.
Trembling violently, Eileen's legs begin to buckle under the king's overwhelming presence. Eileen lets out a pained while struggling to withstand the pressure.
Eileen shivers in fear as Heims watches her with a mocking expression.
Heims reaches toward her head, admitting he admires her display of courage.
Eileen's eyes well with tears as Heims asks if she knows the stories.
Heims asks if Vernua warned her that the Winter King went mad.
Heims warns that provoking the king's madness will lead to dangerous results.
Eileen protests that winter should never become a season defined by madness. Heims remains stoic as Eileen reacts in shock to his icy transformation.
Eileen fears for her life while Heims suppresses a snarling ice spirit.
Eileen watches in shock as the ice spirit cries out in pain.
The spirit lets out several pained gah sounds while struggling against Heims.
Heims looks down with a somber expression after subduing the unruly spirit.
Bright blue energy swirls around Heims as he channels his magical power.
Heims holds a small glowing version of the spirit within his hands. A tiny purified spirit floats between the king's large ice-covered palms. Heims holds a large glowing crystal close to his chest in contemplation.
Heims bows his head, appearing physically drained by his recent magical efforts.
Eileen watches Heims from behind with a look of confusion and fear.
Heavy breathing sounds out as Eileen watches Heims from a safe distance.
Eileen gasps as Heims turns and asks if she is finally satisfied. Heims explains that Eileen nearly turned the Spirit Queen into a demon.
A massive underwater dome protects a hidden forest of lush green trees.
Bound by glowing chains, a blonde woman groans while floating in water. Pink shackles bind the woman's neck and hands as she struggles helplessly.
Vernua shouts at Heims, telling him to think about his actions again.
Vernua rages about her century-long house arrest as the captured Spirit Queen.
Vernua weeps as she asks Heims how he could be so cruel.
Heims stares with cold eyes, repeating the word cruel with total indifference. Heims offers to punish the man responsible for her suffering instead. Heims identifies the target of his punishment as the one who took Renula. Heims looks down and confirms that the man's name is Andre.
Vernua sinks to her knees, looking completely devastated by the king's words.
A vision of Andre appears while Vernua stares blankly into the distance. Vernua trembles on the floor, her face hidden by her long hair.
Heims stands tall over the broken Spirit Queen with a detached expression.
Heims looks down at Vernua and tells her she is still a child. Heims continues, telling Vernua that she has always behaved like a child.
Heims accuses her of allowing powerless people to manipulate and use her. Vernua weakly claims she wasn't used, though her expression shows deep doubt.
A warm memory shows Andre and Vernua together in a peaceful forest. The blonde woman maintains she was not used but was truly in love.
Glowing blue thorns surround a rose as she tells Winter he will never understand.
Vernua notes that to the king, these feelings must seem like immature, childish emotions. Standing over the kneeling Spirit Queen, Heims coldly declares that he loves mankind. With tears in her eyes and shackles on her neck, Vernua confesses her love for Andre.
Heims stares back at her with an unreadable and chillingly stoic expression.
Vernua weeps openly, stating that she has no regrets regarding her past choices.
Heims looks down coldly, explaining that her lack of regret is exactly why she is a child.
Vernua's expression shifts to shock as she stares up at the king's towering presence.
A dark screen signifies a transition as a voice suggests they begin their task.
Vernua sits helplessly within the center of a complex, glowing blue magical circle.
Surprised by a sudden surge of magic, Vernua gasps in a moment of utter confusion.
Heims formally addresses her, naming her as Vernua, the Queen of Spring.
Chains emerge to bind Vernua as Heims arrests her and forbids contact with the thief. A heavy silence follows as Heims forbids her from even informing him of her situation.
Vernua looks down in despair, completely immobilized by the heavy, glowing magical chains.
Heims adds a condition, promising to recognize her love only if the man seeks forgiveness. As Heims walks away, he promises to eventually revive the power of the Spirit Queen.
Vernua screams after him, calling the king a cold-blooded bastard for his cruel decisions.
Vernua rejects his acknowledgement, crying out Andre's name in a fit of pure desperation.
Vernua vows she will never regret her love, even if she is bound for a millennium.
A final command echoes through the darkness, telling her she will never see him again.
Vernua blames Heims for her suffering, wishing their mother could have prevented such cruelty. Vernua accuses Heims of going crazy after their mother vanished, causing his descent into silence.
Heims's eyes glow with an intense blue light as the atmosphere becomes dangerously heavy.
A single tear falls from Vernua's eye as she reels from the king's overwhelming power.
The name Vernua is spoken softly within the void of her hazy memories.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick tap sounding as Heims approaches.
Himes reaches out to touch her chin, referring to her as his poor little sister. Himes admits he has gone crazy, unable to remember the past despite his efforts.
Himes questions if she remembers what was depicted in the damaged mural of his castle. Vernua trembles violently, sobbing that there is no possible way she could remember it.
Himes muses that the mural either depicted divine salvation or its complete opposite.
Sharp, jagged ice begins to crawl up Vernua's neck as Himes touches her skin. Himes suspects the mural was actually a prophecy foretelling the total downfall of their kind.
Vernua's eyes widen as she whispers Himes' name, seeing the loss of his reason.
Himes wonders what would happen if he abandoned the endless regeneration of the seasons. Himes begins to transform into a monstrous ice creature with dark eyes and horns. A flash of light accompanies a pained scream as the memory reaches a crescendo.
The monstrous king holds his sister, promising they will both find a blessed and peaceful end.
Vernua wakes up gasping in her underwater prison, realizing it was all a recurring nightmare. Sitting on her bed, Vernua reinforces her resolve, stating she will never regret her love.
Vernua whispers Andre's name, her eyes reflecting a deep and unyielding sense of longing.
Memories suggest Andreas suffered because of a princess named Elsia L. Vernus.
Vernua curls up on her throne, isolated within the silent beauty of the underwater palace.
She stares up at the glass dome, repeating the name Elsia L. Vernus with anger. Vernua's gaze hardens as she focuses on the princess who caused her lover's suffering.
Floating in the water, Vernua's mind is consumed by vengeful thoughts toward the Arcan princess.
Vernua presses her hand against the glass, vowing that the princess's fate is sealed.
Scratching at the glass, Vernua promises to make Elsia taste hell while she still lives.
Looking down at the red-haired woman, Viana asks if she is the princess.
The red-haired woman stands outside a large church with the young girl. The red-haired woman stares intensely into the distance as a bead of sweat falls.
Wrapped in a blue hooded cloak, Viana repeats her question to the distracted princess. The princess dismisses her concern, telling the girl it is nothing as they walk. A brown-haired man greets the arrival of the red-haired princess with surprise. The man notes that they should have been informed so they could prepare properly. Inside the Grand Temple Hall, the man approaches the princess and her young companion.
The red-haired woman smiles brightly, claiming she only came to the temple to pray.
The priest praises her as a role model before she asks if he saw the sunset.
The priest realizes she's using a secret code while light surrounds the princess. 3 people descend a dark stone spiral staircase lit by a single handheld lantern. 2 guards stand at attention before a large, heavy wooden door in the basement.
Loud laughter echoes through the ornate room as the secret meeting begins.
The priestess gleefully reports that their recent investments have yielded a significant profit.
Gold bars and documents signify that the princess's secret funds have grown 100-fold.
The priestess thanks the red-haired princess for greatly improving the temple's financial situation.
Viana stands by the door, looking small and deeply uncomfortable during the conversation. The princess remarks that loyalty and helping one another are vital in their partnership. The priestess laughs, declaring that she is always impressed by the princess's wisdom. The princess places her hands on the desk, her tone shifting toward a dark warning. Moving with violent speed, the princess draws a blade and attacks the priest.
The priest lets out a confused sound as blood sprays from his slashed throat.
The princess stands over the dying man while blood splatters across the ornate room. Viana lets out a loud, piercing scream of terror at the sight of the murder.
Blood drips from the knife as the princess coldly orders Viana to shut up.
Trembling and gasping for air, Viana is paralyzed with fear for her own life.
The priestess is horrified by the carnage while the princess laments that she missed.
The princess muses about the priest's value while his blood pools on the floor. The red-haired woman smiles at the priestess, telling her not to bother with things. The priestess lets out a pained gah as the bloody knife is pointed at her. The princess explains that she cannot ignore underlings who steal from the slush funds. The princess asks with a playful wink if the priestess was truly unaware.
The princess wipes the blood from the blade, hoping this won't ruin their partnership.
The priestess is frozen in terror as the princess asks for her confirmation. Trembling with a terrified expression, the priestess bows and agrees with the princess.
The princess claims their trust is now stronger after removing the disloyal foreign matter. Guards hold a person down as they weakly thank the princess for her mercy.
Viana lets out a pained scream as the princess roughly grabs her by the arm. The princess commands the priestess to remember the young girl's face very carefully.
The princess mentions her absence from Arcan, offering Viana as a future messenger.
The priestess watches the princess leave, realizing the violence was a calculated message. The priestess trembles, knowing the priest was innocent of the crime he died for. A dark abyss consumes the scene as the priestess reflects on the princess's cruelty.
The priestess weeps into her hands, realizing the priest was killed in her place.
Standing over the body, the red-haired princess smiles and quietly thanks God. A massive crowd cheers as they announce that Princess Elsia has finally arrived.
Elsia waves to the cheering citizens from the top of the temple's grand steps.
Elsia addresses the young girl, causing Viana to flinch with a startled yelp. Elsia warns Viana that looking frightened while accompanying her will draw unwanted attention.
Elsia's expression darkens as she plots to frame Viana for the priest's murder. Viana trembles while apologizing, but the red-haired princess dismisses her fear with a cold, fake kindness.
A woman in the crowd excitedly exclaims that she saw the princess enter the temple.
Citizens cheer for the arrival of Princess Elsia while a hooded woman offers a prayer.
Elsia and Viana descend the temple steps, flanked by guards as the crowd watches.
The people are struck with awe as the princess passes through the armed security.
Elsia offers a gentle, reassuring smile to the captivated bystanders.
A young girl in the crowd asks about the princess's upcoming trip to the capital.
The red-haired woman reacts with feigned surprise to the child's inquiry.
The young girl suggests that a noble lady could take the princess's place on the journey.
The child begs the princess not to go, calling her the pride of their people.
Narration explains that Arkan's heavy burdens should not be forced onto another woman.
Elsia gracefully accepts her royal responsibility, portraying herself as a selfless martyr for her kingdom.
Moved by her words, the commoners tearfully praise the princess as a living angel. Internally, Elsia mocks the people's stupidity, revealing her true desire to escape the countryside.
As she plans her return to the palace, a sudden realization halts her movement.
A ragged young boy stands before the princess, staring up at her with large eyes. The boy reaches out, but the princess's aura shifts into a menacing dark shadow. A massive magical storm erupts above the temple, creating a swirling blue vortex.
High above the chaos, a purple-haired woman struggles while Heims suffers in his monstrous form.
Heims screams in agony as sharp ice shards continue to erupt from his body. Desperate and terrified, the purple-haired woman cries out Heims's game. The woman lets out a pained ah as a sharp blast of energy strikes her.
Heims admits he can no longer control the destructive rampage consuming him.
The purple-haired woman is overwhelmed by shock, unable to comprehend the unfolding tragedy.
She realizes with horror that the monstrous king is enduring unbearable pain.
Heims orders the woman to flee as he loses his grip on his remaining sanity.
Glowing with immense power, Heims stands at the center of a massive, intricate magical array.
Heims declares that the eternal winter governing the world will come to an end today.
A powerful magical force begins to pull the purple-haired woman away from the site.
The woman pleads with the king to wait, her voice full of desperation.
Heims offers her one final opportunity to escape while he still possesses his reason.
The woman screams for him to stop as the magical current intensifies around her.
A blinding explosion of light marks the beginning of the woman's involuntary departure.
Heims warns that the entire area will soon be erased from existence.
The king asserts that the living must return to their place of origin.
Hurled through a chaotic magical tunnel, the woman lets out a pained
Desperate, the woman cries out Heims's name one last time as she is separated from reality.
Drifting into a dark celestial void, the woman groans from the physical toll of the journey.
The purple-haired woman falls through the vast star-filled expanse of the cosmos.
Spinning helplessly in the darkness, she begs for the terrifying sensation to end.
Disoriented and alone, the woman wonders where her destination lies.
Her hand reaches toward a vanishing light as the exit slips further from her reach.
Heim's cold gaze reappears in her mind as he reiterates his final command.
The woman shouts a final accusation, calling the self-sacrificing king incredibly selfish.
A thin trail of glowing stardust meanders through the infinite blackness of space.
Curled in a defensive position, the woman continues her silent descent through the void. She lets out a weary sigh, her eyes reflecting the exhaustion of her ordeal.
A white ceramic pitcher suddenly appears, floating near the woman in the darkness.
Her eyes widen in shock as she notices the unexpected object and whispers a soft, "Eh." Vernua drifts helplessly among massive stone ruins in the starry void. Gasping in shock, she watches as everyday objects spin past her.
Vernua observes that the remains of the palace fall from the light.
Heims warns that this crumbling place will soon vanish into nothing.
Utterly bewildered, Vernua desperately asks what is happening to her world.
A massive magical vortex erupts, pulling debris into a swirling center.
Vernua cries out in pain, worried about Heims amidst the destruction.
She screams for the chaos to stop, lamenting her wasted efforts.
The red-haired woman recalls preventing a demon from Siwan Mahar.
She mentions saving the Spirit King and hating the novel's ending. Vernua questions the path toward extinction, fearing she cannot go home.
She screams Heims's name, demanding to return to the Winter Palace.
A glowing blue spirit stone necklace begins to shimmer on her chest.
Shimmering light erupts from the stones, startling the desperate purple-haired woman.
Vernua identifies the glowing blue gem as the legendary Spirit Stone.
Sharp ice shards and magical energy swirl around the glowing pendant.
A tiny winged blue spirit creature suddenly emerges from the stone.
Vernua is left speechless as the small creature hovers before her.
The spirit reaches out, pulling Vernua toward a distant, brilliant light.
The small creature perches on her finger, surrounded by glowing dust.
Relieved, Vernua thanks God that a spirit has finally awakened.
Vernua hurtles through the debris toward a blinding white leptopot.
She encourages the spirit, claiming they are almost at their goal.
The blue spirit looks back as its body begins to crumble.
Vernua's heart sinks as she sees the spirit's form failing.
The tiny creature remains focused despite its face beginning to crack.
Its skin turns gray and brittle, disintegrating into the cosmic expanse.
The crumbling spirit's final words are a desperate plea to save Heims.
Vernua pleads for the spirit to stop and wait as it fades.
She watches in horror as the creature completely turns into dust.
Clutching the fading remains, Vernua begs the spirit not to die.
She floats alone in the dark void as the spirit's dust scatters.
Staring at her empty hands, she gasps in profound, silent shock.
Sobbing, Vernua apologizes, believing she broke the loyal, tiny spirit.
Shimmering trails of light echo the command to save the king. Vernua weeps uncontrollably, her face buried in her trembling hands.
Suddenly, Vernua looks up with a sharp, determined glint in her eyes. She reaches toward the blinding white exit, driven by a new purpose. A tall, red-haired princess looms over a ragged boy in the snout. The princess's cold blue eyes meet the boy's wide, innocent gaze. A small, dirty hand holds out a simple piece of food.
The boy offers the food he saved for the beautiful princess. Nearby commoners whisper, questioning who would leave a mess like that.
The freckled girl in blue pulls the boy away from her.
She frantically tells the boy to go back as she panics. A firm hand suddenly grabs the girl's blue cloak from behind.
The red-haired princess's touch causes the girl to let out an ah.
Paralyzed with terror, the girl stares at the silent, looming princess.
A woman in the crowd gasps in shock at the confrontation.
Two hooded citizens watch the scene with expressions of pure horror.
Citizens in the crowd watch the princess with stunned expressions.
Soft white clouds drift across the pale winter sky. Princess Elsia kneels before the boy as the crowd watches.
The boy holds a potato while the princess smiles warmly.
Elsia takes the food, praising the boy for his sweet generosity. Onlookers gasp, overwhelmed by the princess's display of humility.
Maintaining her graceful facade, the red-haired princess bites the potato.
Elsia glows with saintly light as petals fall around her.
The young boy's eyes shimmer with pure, heartfelt admiration.
The crowd cheers for Princess Elsia and the Kingdom of Arkan.
An official barks orders at maids carrying heavy water buckets.
Steaming water splashes into a large, ornate marble bathtub.
Wearing a sheer robe, Elsia's footsteps click against the hallway.
The freckled maid trembles violently, tears streaming down her face.
Maids attend to Elsia as she stands to the bath.
Elsia disgustedly claims the commoner's foul scent still clings to her. She complains about being surrounded by people who smelled like cattle.
Elsia orders her servants to burn the clothes she wore today.
Leaning in, Elsia asks the maid if anything was worse.
Elsia's face contorts as she rants about the orphan's filthy potato. Fuming, she hates that she was forced to eat commoner food.
Her eyes widen with a terrifying, cold fury toward her staffs.
Elsia blames the maid's incompetence while the girl begs for mercy. The maid grovels in the corner, paralyzed by absolute terror.
Elsia fake smiles, suggesting a strong will can overcome any trial.
A dark, sinister smirk spreads across the princess's pale face.
Elsia tells the girl to prove her will for forgiveness. A large servant looms over the sobbing, freckled maid. The senior servant wears an apron stained with dark, foul grime.
A dirty, wet hand reaches out toward the terrified car.
A bucket is filled with rotting fish and disgusting waste. The maid retches in horror as she is forced toward filth.
A dark vortex erupts, shattering the reality around the scene. Vernua screams as the powerful magical current pulls at her.
Hurled through a patterned void, the purple-haired woman shouts, "Whoa!"
Vernua lands roughly on a cold, flat surface with a thud. She lies face down on the ice, stunned and breathless.
Pushing herself up, Vernua realizes she has finally returned.
Vernua frantically searches for Heims, wondering where she is manded.
Her green eye widens in shock as she spots a disturbance. Massive debris and a dark castle silhouette loom in the distance.
A monstrous shadow reveals a face with jagged, sharp teeth.
The monstrous king towers over a defeated, white-haired man.
Vernua gasps Heims' name, her heart sinking at the fate.
The monstrous king declares that they are finally becoming one.
Vernua watches the dark transformation, questioning if it is him.
Vernua begins to run, screaming for Heims to stay with her.
A wall of screaming, shadowy spirits rises to block her path.
A dark, eel-like spirit coils around her as she shouts, "No!"
Shadowy entities swarm Vernua as armored figures watch the chaos. Vernua reels in horror as suppressed memories of commoners suffering under a red-haired woman flood her mind. Wrapped in dark, coiling tentacles, the purple-haired woman confesses her overwhelming terror.
Letting out a pained, long-drawn scream, Vernua feels the weight of her trauma as the spirit stone below her begins to glow.
A brilliant, holy light erupts from the center of the chaos, forcefully driving back the shadowy entities.
Gasping for air, Vernua's green eyes widen in sudden shock at the fading darkness.
Kneeling on the cold ice, Vernua notes with relief that her senses have finally returned after the shadows vanished.
A look of profound, sudden realization crosses Vernua's face as the truth becomes clear to her. Sprinting forward with desperate urgency, Vernua screams for Heims to resist the dark influence.
The monstrous blue-skinned king looms over a struggling Heims, claiming to be the physical embodiment of his fear.
Gripping her glowing necklace, Vernua shouts that she is coming to rescue him as the shadows scream. The Dark King stares with a cold, hollow gaze, his presence inciting a sense of dread. A vision of a blue, clawed hand reaching for a dark crystal reflects on Winter's role as a bringer of death.
Himes groans in agony as the monstrous entity tightens its hold on him. Narrations explain that Himes willingly shoulders the pain and terror of all living things in the Winter world. The monstrous king asserts his dominance, declaring himself the root cause of all suffering throughout the ages. Text reveals that Himes has successfully suppressed the darkness despite losing the means to purify it. The monster mockingly licks Himes, demanding they merge as one, while Vernua screams for it to stop.
Hurled through the air, Vernua gasps as the physical toll of the mental onslaught leaves her breathless. A masked man in her memory mockingly checks on her before starting a cruel new day of torment.
Vernua's spirit cries out in mental anguish as the horrific visions of her past threaten to consume her. She kneels alone in a vast, dark void as the remnants of the shadows slowly drift away.
Gasping heavily, Vernua desperately tries to convince herself that the terrifying visions are merely an illusion.
She stands up with renewed resolve, firmly declaring that the nightmare is not currently happening. An upside-down vision of the purple-haired woman appears, wondering if her ordeal has finally reached its end. The monstrous king reveals his jagged teeth, roaring that the Winter's purpose in this world has concluded.
Hymas' pale eye reflects a quiet resignation as he prepares to accept an end to his responsibility.
The blue-skinned monster prepares to finish Himes as a sudden, bright flare disrupts the scene. Vernua shouts a fierce insult at Himes, her face twisted with a mix of fury and desperation. Himes watches in stunned silence as Vernua stands before him, her silhouette framed by the roiling shadows. Trembling with intense emotion, Vernua glares at him, her eyes burning with an unyielding fire. She berates him for his stubbornness, calling him a cold and inflexible man for choosing self-sacrifice. Vernua questions if he threw her out simply so he could go berserk and die alone. The monster snarls in outrage, offended that a mere human would dare to interfere in their union. Vernua raises the Spirit Stone, which releases a massive, blinding pulse of divine energy into the dark. The monster screams in absolute agony as the intense light begins to tear his dark form apart. Vernua stands as a lone beacon of hope, watching as the shadows and the monster retreat. Weak and fading, Himes urges her to flee back through the portal before it closes forever. Vernua refuses to listen, holding her necklace and insisting that there must be a way to save him.
Vernua realizes that the ancient message Elsia desperately sought was hidden within Himes all along.
The blue-skin monster chokes Himes with a dark tendril, causing him to let out a pained groan. The monster sneers at the idea of wasting a precious spirit stone on a lowly, insect-like human. Himes gasps that he is nothing more than a hollow shell without memories, urging her to give up.
Vernua demands to know why he won't ask for help, reminding him of the love between them.
She asks if he thinks humans are incapable of reciprocating his deep feelings of love.
The monster laughs mockingly, asserting that Himes' fate is already sealed, regardless of her words. Vernua stands her ground, her face filled with an expression of pure, glowing determination. As Himes lies on the ice, Vernua suggests that they should simply love each other together.
A soft gasp escapes her lips as she notices a terrifying change in the man before her.
Her heart sinks as she realizes with horror that Himes' body is actually starting to disappear. Grabbing his hand as he fades, Vernua screams for him to stop as a sudden thud echoes. The blue monster screams a pained "Gah!" as holy light erupts. Cradling Himes, the purple-haired woman watches the darkness dissolve away. Himes faintly pleads for the nightmare to finally come to an end. A desperate cry for him to come back echoes through the void. Crying out his full name, Eileen clings to him with absolute desperation. The monster looms as Eileen watches in a state of pure shock. White light surges from Himes' eyes as his dormant power awakens. A thunderous crack sounds as massive shards of ice suddenly shatter. Shadows swirl as Eileen looks on with wide, terrified green eyes. The monster threatens Eileen's life, ordering her to stay out of its way. Himes' face becomes a mask of determination as he glows brightly. With a fierce strike, Himes cuts through the sharp, dark ice shards. The fading monster lets out a series of pained, raspy chuckles. Retreating into the shadows, the king vows that they will merge someday. Blood drips from Himes' chin as the intense battle finally concludes. Himes stares blankly into the distance, his physical strength nearly spent. Touching his bloodstained neck, Himes lets out a soft pain sound. Eileen calls out his name, her voice trembling with intense relief. Fresh blood spatters across the sharp, crystalline shards of broken ice. Horror strikes as Eileen realizes Himes has been lethally impaled. Gasping for air, the purple-haired woman coughs up a spray of blood. Eileen smiles through her pain, glad he is finally himself again. Himes screams Eileen's name in a voice filled with raw agony. Bleeding from her mouth, Eileen looks at him with fading eyes. Eileen weakly expresses her joy that he finally called her name. Reaching out one last time, she whispers softly about her name. A massive ice spike pierces through her chest, ending her strength. Himes catches her falling body, blood staining his pale, white skin.
He begs her to stay with him as her life fades.
Cradling his beloved, Heims remains alone in the dark, icy abyss.
Eileen awakens in a radiant void, wearing a simple white dress.
Opening her eyes, she tries to process the sudden, glowing change. Eileen stands bewildered in the center of the brilliant white light.
Vowing to find Heims, Eileen enters a lush, vibrant forest memory.
Children splash happily in a sacred lake near a golden-haired goddess.
Eileen realizes she has entered the depths of a hidden memory. Narrations reveal that these are the long-lost memories of Heims' past.
Eileen wonders if this world existed before the ancient goddess vanished.
A young girl hugs her mother, celebrating her newfound sense of self.
The blonde goddess explains that the ritual offers a spiritual rebirth. Other children wonder if they have been reborn through the water. Text warns that human minds may break under extreme longevity's weight.
The goddess cleanses them every millennium to preserve their sanity.
Young Heims watches the divine ritual with wide, curious blue eyes.
Stroking his head, the goddess asks him if he is still hurrying.
The other spirit children watch the interaction with puzzled, curious expressions.
Heims looks up and confirms that his pain has finally ceased.
Narrations describe their purpose as being reactive to the world's energy.
Images of seasons depict cycles of love, hope, and romantic fruitfulness. The children giggle together as they play in the holy wire.
The young, blue-haired boy looks up as he is identified as Winter.
He stares forward with a heavy heart while contemplating pain and fear.
His companions react with wide-eyed shock at the sudden, heavy atmosphere.
The blonde goddess tenderly cups the boy's face in the sacred lick. He looks into her eyes as she holds him with divine gentleness. A soft chew sounds as the goddess kisses the top of his head.
Blushing slightly, the boy looks up at her with a stunned expression.
The golden-haired goddess offers him a warm, serene, and knowing smile.
She wishes for him to find peace and sleep well in the future.
A starry expanse carries her promise of hope hidden within an ancient mural.
She places a comforting hand on his head as they stand in lauder.
The goddess reassures him that a day of true salvation will eventually come.
Turning away, the divine woman prepares to leave the sacred pool behind. Eileen watches the memory from the bushes, gasping at the unfolding revelation.
She wonders if the ancient goddess can actually see her through time.
A close-up of the goddess's knowing smile suggests she senses Eileen's presence.
A final message appears, asking for someone to protect Heims' future self.
Eileen is suddenly pulled away as the memory begins to dissolve.
She reels in confusion as the scene shifts to a different, darker time.
A bloodied, red-haired man gasps for air while clutching a deep lantern.
A sudden whoa echoes as the man is violently hurled across the floor.
Adult Heims stands over him, his clothes stained with fresh, crimson blood.
The red-haired man stares up in terror at the cold, relentless Winter.
A sharp gah sounds as Heims delivers a final, brutal blow.
Blood spatters across the floor as the life fades from his opponent.
Heims drags the fallen man through the palace, his expression utterly hollow.
The dark-skinned woman intercepts him, demanding that he stop the senseless violence.
Heims looks back with a chilling gaze, unmoved by her desperate plea. He justifies his actions by claiming the other man tried to kill him. She questions the morality of his response given his own extreme power. She explains that despite his efforts, the cycle of death refuses to end.
The woman laments how spring has been trapped in sorrow for countless years.
A vision of a scorched, dying world reflects the consequences of their conflict. She begs Heims to take action before the entire world finally perishes.
Heims commands her to gather the other spirits at the sacred lake immediately.
Standing tall, he declares himself the eldest child of the goddess, Winter. He recalls the unique gift his mother bestowed upon him at birth.
Heims offers to share his essence to help his suffering siblings.
A quick psh sounds as he begins to manifest his dormant power.
He glows with an intense, holy light as the ritual begins.
The children find themselves submerged in the glowing, restorative waters of life. They splash joyfully as the water purifies their spirits and minds. The pink-haired girl cheers in delight as the ritual proves successful. They celebrate their rebirth while Heims watches them from a distance. The red-haired boy marvels at the unexpected salvation they have just received.
Heims remains silent and stoic, his shadow looming over the group.
They turn to him with concern, asking if he is also all right.
Heims gives a faint, weary smile while insisting that he is fine.
Together, they resolve to repair the damage done to the world's climate.
The spirits prepare to return to their palaces to fulfill their duties.
Shocked, the blue-haired man questions the meaning of his failure, realizing he cannot heal himself.
Fearing the worst, Heims wonders what his mother's fate implies for his own future survival. A hand brushes softly against the ancient wall, its texture cold and unyielding. Adult Heims stands before a grand mural, surrounded by floating blue spirits in a sunlit hall.
Cradling a tiny spirit, he reassures it that the salvation his mother predicted will eventually arrive.
He instructs the creature to stay strong and protect the other seasonal spirits until that day. Looking over the horizon, he hopes they haven't already destroyed too much of the world. Heims claims he is used to pain while noting the creature's seizures have finally stopped.
Bathed in moonlight, the weary man sits by the window and confesses he cannot sleep. Staring blankly, Heims realizes he can no longer remember the last time he truly rested.
The blue-haired man collapses, agonizing over his past memories which are slowly disappearing forever. Terror grips him as he questions if his fading mind is proof of descending madness. Himes watches a spirit creature begin a dark, unstable transformation while clutching his head. The blue spirits warp into terrifying shadow-winged demonic beasts right before his very eyes.
A fierce growl sounds while a spirit turns into a demon, fated to consume everything.
Looking downcast, Himes regrets how his own unstable state is poisoning the creatures he loves.
A soft pop sounds as brilliant blue energy manifests within his outstretched pale hand.
Walking away, he laments his inability to escape the suffering brought on by his wakefulness.
Shards crackle as Himes encases himself in jagged crystalline ice, wishing only for eternal sleep. Heavy gasps echo through the hall as a weakened Himes leans against the cold stone.
A massive clawed shadow reaches out to seize the vulnerable man in a tight grip.
The Shadow King mocks him, calling him a king incapable of protecting his own household.
The monster whispers for him to give up and be consumed to find easy peace.
A sudden thud sounds as Himes clenches his fist in a fit of rage. Gasping in agony, Himes curses his condition as dark energy begins to surge through him. He screams in frustration, declaring his very existence to be a cruel and inescapable curse. A thunderous crash sounds as a pillar of stone shatters into countless flying pieces. Turning his back on the goddess's image, Himes rejects the promise of salvation entirely. A heavy boom sounds as he demands to know why he was even created.
A sharp crack sounds as he begs his creator to have simply destroyed him instead.
Breathless gasps escape his lips as the broken man weeps in the silent, dark corridor.
Kneeling alone, Himes contemplates the hundreds of thousands of years spent in absolute, crushing isolation. Staring at the moon, he declares his utter indifference to the fate of the dying world.
Floating in a radiant void, Eileen watches the tragic memories and prepares for her end. Tears stream down Eileen's face as she cries out Himes' name with heartbreaking desperation. She screams for him again, her heart shattering as she witnesses the depth of his suffering.
Eileen is struck by the painful realization that she never knew the truth about him.
Wrapping her arms around the memory of the kneeling man, Eileen offers a silent, comforting embrace.
Eileen looks forward with a somber expression, her green eyes shimmering with unshed bitter tears. Crying softly, she laments the incredible loneliness Himes was forced to endure for so long.
The blue-haired man cradles the purple-haired woman while standing in the glowing sacred lake. Gentle ripples spread across the surface of the clear, tranquil, and brilliantly glowing water.
A hand drifts peacefully in the water as leaves float by on the surface.
Eileen's face is etched with sorrow as she remains submerged in the divine healing pool.
Looking up with shock, Eileen calls Himes' name as she begins to recognize his face.
A splash sounds as she cups his cheek, asking if he has finally come back.
The blonde goddess watches the scene with a serene and knowing expression on her face. Spotting the divine woman by the tree, Eileen calls out the goddess's name in surprise. The other spirits explain that Winter has been sacrificing his power for days to help. A sharp gasp sounds as Eileen's green eyes widen in a state of shock. Realizing something about her physical state, Eileen notes that her body feels different. Watching the scene, the red-haired spirit notes he has never seen Himes act. A soft paw sounds as a memory shows Himes desperately healing an unconscious Eileen. Panicking, Himes shouts for help because he cannot save her alone. He continues to scream for someone to save her quickly as she lies motionless.
The other spirits join Himes, pulling their celestial powers to save Eileen's life.
A loud paw sounds as a massive pillar of light erupts. Exhausted, the red-haired spirit informs Himes that they have successfully saved her life. A quick pock sounds as the dark-skinned woman says she will heal naturally. A steady paw sounds while Himes insists on cleaning and healing every wound. Narration explains that Himes has been treating her without any sleep or food. Eileen's chest glows as her life force is slowly restored.
A final message confirms that Himes fully healed her every single wound.
A sudden splash sounds as Himes carries Eileen in the lake.
On the sacred lake, the healing process reaches its final stage. A heavy thud sounds as Himes embraces her and immediately passes out. Eileen holds the unconscious Himes close, whispering his name in the water. The blonde goddess watches the pair with a stoic and somber expression. An ominous void frames the question of why he kept secrets. Shouting, Vernua demands to know why Himes hid his suffering from the other spirits. The dark-skinned woman watches Vernua's emotional outburst with a concerned expression. The red-haired spirit notes that Himes hid his pain to protect his siblings. Crying, Vernua laments that she never would have left him alone if she knew. She regrets leaving Himes isolated in his ice castle despite her past hatred. The spirits explain that they must now return to their respective seasonal palaces. A vision shows how the spirit realm cracked when winter ran amok.
The dark-skinned spirit asks Eileen to take care of Himes as time resumes.
Shocked by the sudden responsibility, Eileen can only manage a confused response.
Vernua's profile remains visible as she prepares to depart the sacred area.
Vernua leaves Andre and Eileen's care while asking for an ancient antidote.
Offering a mysterious smile, the blonde woman asks if Eileen still doesn't know.
A sudden shoo sounds as the seasonal spirits vanish in light.
Confused, the brown-haired woman clutches the unconscious Himes with a wide-eyed expression.
Eileen panics about the antidote while Vernua's voice commands her to free Himes.
A loud za sounds as Eileen screams for the goddess to come back.
Eileen's hand gently rests on Himes' arm as he stirs. Waking up, the blue-haired man reaches out and touches Eileen's face.
Himes softly calls out Eileen's name as he awakens fully.
Eileen looks down at Himes, realizing the depth of the truth she found.
A sudden splash sounds as Himes pulls Eileen into a desperate, tight hug. The pair shares a deep, silent embrace in the water.
Blushing, Eileen asks Himes if he is all right while he continues to hold her.
Himes confesses his terror, admitting he thought he would never be able to save her. Looking at him tenderly, Eileen reassures him that she is still alive and present.
Closing his eyes in relief, Himes admits he feared he had actually killed her.
Eileen's hand reaches for his hair as she calls out again.
Looking down, Eileen offers an apology for her past behavior toward him.
Eileen apologizes for her earlier blame and asks why he left his loyal servants.
They gaze at each other while remaining in the water.
Looking downcast, Himes admits the failure was because he refused to listen to her. Himes says he has been waiting for the salvation predicted by God. The brown-haired woman feels her pain fade as her memories return.
A grand mural depicts divine figures within a celestial hall.
Eileen wonders if the mural is what Elsia was looking for.
An ancient prophecy states a barefooted bride will visit this place. The prophecy declares that the love of winter will save him.
Eileen realizes she is the bride mentioned in the winter prophecy.
The blue-haired man gently cups the face of the shocked one.
A brilliant light surrounds the couple as they share a kiss.
Eileen sleeps peacefully surrounded by a bed of white roses.
A sudden realization strikes as Eileen's bright green eyes snaps open. Himes rests among the flowers while looking down at the woman.
Waking with a sudden woe sounding, Eileen startles and clutches a pillow. Looking toward her, the blue-haired man questions her sudden outburst.
Eileen wonders why she is sleeping there and why he is present.
Himes explains she passed out yesterday while he was recovering his strength. Shocked by the news, the brown-haired woman processes having passed out.
With a playful smile, Himes asks if she truly does not remember.
A heavy silence fills the room as Eileen stares at him blankly. Realization hits as Eileen lets out a sharp ah sounding in embarrassment.
A soft ha sounds as she recalls their intimate kiss in the water.
The man holds the woman close while they remain in the lake. Himes formally addresses Eileen as his designated winter bride.
Eileen realizes Himes' promise from the novel is now being made to her.
She contemplates how the world is deviating from the novel's original plot.
Himes asks Eileen why she has such a strange look on her face.
Eileen begins to explain that she has been thinking about many things.
Himes suspects she was dissatisfied with their kiss and the formal vows.
Tension builds as the couple leans in close to one another once more.
The two share a passionate embrace amidst the flowers and balar.
A muffled sounds as Eileen's toes curl and she clutches his clothes.
Breathless gasps of ha sound as the kiss deepens in the glowing lake.
Overwhelmed by embarrassment, the brown-haired woman hides her face and screams.
Himes laughs while teasing her about her previous lack of reaction.
Eileen asks why his seizure stopped only when she called his name.
She finds it strange that the healing did not occur much earlier.
Eileen notes that their first encounter and hug produced no such effect.
Himes claims the difference is that she did not love him then. Eileen realizes her changing feelings were the key to his recovery. With a sudden munch sounding, Himes feeds her and promises his love.
Eileen is left breathless and blushing by his sudden, bold declaration.
The brown-haired woman sits stunned with a macaron in her mouth.
Eileen claims her feelings were merely a general love for all humanity.
She recalls feeling a duty to help him because of his puppy-like eyes.
Himes asks if it was pity, while Eileen insists it was humanitarian love.
Internally, Eileen admits his handsome face and kiss nearly made her heart explode.
Himes wonders about the strange form her supposed love for humanity takes.
A beautiful floral frame highlights the sentiment that she remains pretty regardless.
The blue-haired man reaches out to wipe a crumb from Eileen's face.
Eileen is left wide-eyed and speechless by his intimate and caring gesture.
Himes notes that Eileen used to be as cold as ice. Eileen looks at him with a silent, thoughtful expression.
Eileen informs him that she must depart for the capital soon.
Himes questions why she is planning to leave him along.
Eileen explains that humans have responsibilities they must fulfill.
Himes dismisses her reasoning while teasing her strange form of love.
Eileen insists her feelings are a result of the Emma Petticut.
Himes sighs, asking if she truly still blames the condition.
Eileen tells him that he will discover the truth in time.
Himes vows to stay with her until the Amopadica is lifted.
Narration recalls Elsia stealing his powers and causing his disappearance.
Eileen asks Himes to trust her during her short trip.
Smirking, Himes tells her to do whatever she wishes.
Himes asks about her specific goals in the capital. Sunlight gleams off the grand and imposing walls of the palace.
Elsia arrives at the palace, determined to become the new empress.
An official welcomes Elsia and offers to escort her. The freckled maid follows the princess with a worried expression.
The maid recalls a week of nausea and past gore.
A sudden sharp gasp sounds as the maid covers her mouth.
The maid fears the princess's hatred and her own return.
A voice announces the arrival of King Leonide Rex de Reknard.
Elsia smiles confidently as she prepares to meet the king.
Guards open the heavy doors, revealing a rowdy throne room.
A thunderous wah sounds as Elsia is startled by the noise.
Rough men engage in drinking and wrestling within the palace.
The crowd cheers wildly for the ongoing wrestling match.
A heavy glugging sound as men drink beer from large mugs.
Elsia is visibly shocked and offended by the rowdy scene.
A sharp gah sounds as Leonide pins his opponent down.
The men cheer loudly to celebrate the king's wrestling victory. Leonide looks back, noting the princess's surprised and repulsed expression.
Leonide explains that his guards are former mercenary ruffians.
A soft thud sounds as Leonide walks barefoot toward the princess.
Leonide asks the princess which kingdom she has traveled from. Elsia realizes she is standing before the infamous Wolf King.
A confident smile spreads across Elsia's face as she understands.
Elsia introduces herself as Princess Elsia Elbernice of Arkin.
The two exchange intense glares filled with pride and challenge. Leonide welcomes her to the private palace reserved for noble pests.
Elsia observes the other noble hostages who have already arrived.
A sharp intake of breath sounds as Elsia notices someone. Flashbacks show noblewomen and spirits gathered in the Rural Villa. Narration explains Leonide's plan to select a suitable empress. Elsia considers this competition to be quite convenient for her.
Eileen and Himes walk together through a lively, bustling village.
The gray-haired king of the territory is briefly shown.
Himes and Eileen stand together under a vibrant sunset sky.
An old man kneels and reports that mercenaries have arrived. The spirits of Winter and Ivergina's soldiers stand ready.
Eileen and Himes walk through the village as the people offer their king heartfelt thanks.
The villagers declare their newfound strength and resolve to protect their home themselves from now on.
Eileen smiles warmly while observing the peaceful and prosperous state of the village.
Narration explains that Himes brought Eileen to Ivergina just as she prepared to leave for the capital. Himes looks out over the village that had once been forgotten for 1,000 years.
Seeking to restore the land, Himes created a massive diamond mine within the ruined village. Himes encourages his people to use the wealth to protect the village and ensure its prosperity.
High atop a tree, Himes shows Eileen how the entire village can be seen and heard.
Eileen recalls sulking and climbing the same tree whenever the village grown-ups scolded her as a child. Listening to the voices from below, Eileen realizes she has missed everyone in her village. Determined to share the moment, she turns to Himes with an excited expression. Himes gazes at the brown-haired woman with a calm and steady intensity.
Startled by his sudden proximity, Eileen lets out a sudden, loud whoa sounding. A sudden, sharp ah sounds as Eileen's bare foot slips off the thick branch. Himes catches her instantly, pulling her safely against his chest amidst the falling leaves.
Himes questions why Eileen reacts with such shock whenever she sees his face lately.
Blushing deeply, Eileen admits she simply cannot get used to being so close to his handsome face.
A brief moment of silence follows as the two remain close together on the branch.
Holding her protectively, Himes insists they stay in this position because the height is dangerous.
Under the full moon, Himes vows to do whatever is necessary to save the people of Ivergina. Eileen gently reaches out to touch the face of the blue-haired man.
Eileen asks Himes if he knows the true reason why the villagers are singing tonight.
Eileen explains that the songs represent the people's joy at the return of their king.
Eileen tells Himes that what the people truly need is reassurance that he has not forgotten them.
Himes promises that with her by his side, he will never become a monster again.
Himes refuses to be left behind, declaring he will follow her even to the capital.
Eileen explains that they must solve human problems using human methods rather than spiritual ones.
Eileen promises she won't exploit him like Elsia did and hopes for his freedom from the Amapetica.
Himes considers the prophecy and reflects on how she has toyed with his heart. In a symbolic vision of a shattered heart, Himes warns he may not want to see her again.
Eileen fears that once the curse is lifted, he will no longer look at her with kindness. A close-up of Eileen's bright green eye reveals her inner worry and hesitation.
Eileen confesses her profound fear that Himes will eventually grow to hate her.
Himes notes the complex nature of humans while looking at her with a thoughtful expression.
A sudden wah sounds as Himes carries Eileen while leaping down from the high branch.
Eileen looks up at him with a mixture of surprise and growing affection.
Himes offers a new gift to replace the spirit stone she lost while saving him. The blue-haired man carefully slides a sparkling jewel-encrusted ring onto Eileen's finger.
Shocked by the intimate gesture, Eileen stares down at the beautiful ring on her hand.
The couple stands together in a soft, ethereal light under the starry night sky.
Himes vows that he will be present wherever she goes from now on. Eileen questions if he will truly be there whenever she faces danger or difficulty. The peaceful mountains glow under the starlight as their conversation continues.
Eileen looks toward him with a silent, thoughtful realization about his commitment. Reaching out, Eileen playfully pats Himes's chest to test his resolve.
Eileen demands a solemn promise from him as she clutches the fabric of his shirt.
Himes asks her to promise that she will call for him immediately if she needs any help.
Himes warns that if she does not promise, he will not allow her to go alone.
With a determined look, the brown-haired woman confirms her understanding of his pledge.
The two share a tender and meaningful embrace as they reach an agreement. Eileen sits alone in her rustic kitchen, lost in deep thought. Looking down at her hand, Eileen gazes at the sparkling ring Himes gave her.
A heavy sigh escapes the brown-haired woman as she closes her eyes. Eileen smiles softly, whispering her heartfelt thanks to Himes for his gift. As a hand tugs her shoulder, the blue-haired man's presence is suddenly felt. Himes appears behind her, asking if she needed him, leaving her blushing and startled. Eileen marvels at how he showed up exactly where she was waiting.
Himes questions the sudden summons, reminding her of her earlier instructions for him.
With a sudden rustle sounding, Eileen turns and pulls him into a tight hug. Startled by the unexpected contact, Himes stares down at her in complete surprise.
Tenderly stroking her hair, Himes wonders what could have happened so quickly.
Blushing fiercely, Eileen considers the weight of her decision to leave him soon. Eileen looks up, explaining her fear of the pain he'll endure while she's away. She insists on healing him before her departure to prevent him from suffering. Reaching out, Eileen playfully pats the head of the seated blue-haired man. Himes questions the necessity of her actions while she praises his greatness.
Looking slightly embarrassed, Himes suggests they keep their current activities a secret.
Eileen stands with open arms, offering a therapeutic hug to settle things.
Himes pulls her close, insisting that she use his name during their embrace.
Resting her hands on his chest, Eileen whispers his name in a heartfelt thanks. A brilliant divine light suddenly erupts from the blue-haired man's entire body. The sudden surge causes Himes to collapse onto her with a startled whoa sounding.
Panicked, Eileen looks at him and asks if he is feeling unwell.
A soft thud sounds as Himes leans against her, assuring her he is fine. Looking dazed, Himes claims to feel beautiful down to the tips of his hair. He likens the sensation to a cleansing ritual he once experienced long ago.
Eileen is stunned as she realizes the extent of his miraculous recovery.
Breathless, Himes confesses he has never felt such an incredible sensation before. Eileen is left completely flustered by the sheer intensity of his handsome gaze. The blue-haired man rests his head in her lap as Eileen looks on, confused. Internally, Himes marvels at the overwhelming feeling produced by a simple hug. He stares up at her, wondering what more intimate gestures might feel like. Eileen looks back with wide eyes, her heart racing from the bold suggestion.
Frantically pushing him away, Eileen tells him it's time to return to his palace.
Outside, villagers and spirits finish loading the carriage for Eileen's journey. Eileen urges everyone to hurry, her face still red from her encounter with Himes.
Sitting apart, Eileen's heart continues to pound as Himes watches her silently.
King Leonide sits at his desk, irritably refusing to meet with any guests. The Grand Chamberlain reports that he delivered the king's message to the visitor.
Leonide dismisses the matter entirely, ordering the Chamberlain to send the lady a letter.
The official explains that the lady threatened them with charges of treason.
Intrigued by the boldness, Leonide asks for the identity of this mysterious lady.
A visualization of Princess Elsia appears, looking regal and full of pride.
Narration describes her history of building a private army and a massive fortune.
Leonide reflects on the reports detailing the princess's sharp and calculating nature.
The reports mention her cold eyes and her dominant behavior at the villa.
She is known for using her intelligence to exploit the weaknesses of others.
With a sharp thud sounding, the king drops the report onto his desk.
Smirking, Leonide decides to meet her and orders the official to let her in.